Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolish Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religion. Welcome to the 200 subscriber show. Of course, there's something a little bit odd about it. Can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe sometime during the show we'll figure it out. Well, I just wanted to have a little show for all you subscribers. In fact, I did not shill this out except for to one person who made a special request, and I shilled it out only to them. So, really wanted to say thank you to those of you who subscribed to my channel, and only those who've subscribed to the channel. Now, why exactly you do that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I wonder if you're sure why you would have subscribed to a channel like mine. I am arguing with just everybody. Yep, it's true. I'm arguing with Christians of every sect, with Hinduists, with Buddhists, with just everybody. And I'm saying some really crazy things. I'm saying that they have had a shallow view of their own religion for a very, very long time. And how do I have any right? I mean, I'm not a scholar. I'm not a theologian. I never went to seminary. I don't have the background for this. And it's very strange that I can even understand this and make a decent argument. Considering my background on the topic, it's very strange indeed. But I actually believe that that's confirmation of the idea instead of dismissal of the idea. Because if I had come up with this, well, I'd probably be very, very proud of myself. And that would be harmful to it. If I'd come up with this, it would have taken me years of study, maybe a lifetime of study of each of these religions. And that's something I could not have done. But what if it is something I could not have done? What if I didn't do it? What if prayer actually happened to an anti-theist? What if that's what happened? How weird would that be? Would it be plausible to believe that I made it true because I wanted to make it true as an unstudied anti-theist? Well, certainly that doesn't make any sense. How about this? How about I had accidentally studied all of these different religions throughout my life unknowingly? I'm not sure how you would do that. Perhaps I had some deep depression and desires to have something stable in my life that I just felt like was lacking. Well, if you think that's the case, I would laugh, because I was just starting out building a new business, doing home improvement repair. That's true. But I had a pretty girlfriend, years my junior, who was into yoga. And although she had kids, the kids were very nice. And we got along fairly well, considering I wasn't their dad and not the woman's husband, you know. And I had really cool toys back then. I had a Ford F-250, turbo diesel, long bed, true crew cab that I had paid cash for. I had a Yamaha 1700 Silverado Roadstar. Very nice. It looks a lot like, if you don't know that bike, it looks a lot like a Harley, but more powerful and runs better and doesn't go to the shop, every few months. I had more toys than I've ever had in my life. And I was really enjoying that. And I wasn't depressed. I wasn't upset. I wasn't looking for comfort in my life. I didn't have a drug habit. I wasn't an alcoholic. People who know me, like my sweet baby sister B, know that actually there was nothing remarkable happening in my life that would make me want this. And in fact, I didn't want it. In fact, I rejected it right from the start. That's the truth of it. In fact, I harshly rejected it and set out to disprove it. And I started that in the first 5 minutes that I had this reading frame introduced to me. I started trying to disprove it. Now, that was early in the year of 2012. And to date, to this very day, I do not know how to disprove it. To this day, I have invited others to come and help me, which they probably think is fighting with me to disprove this. But that's not actually the case. They would actually be helping me to disprove this. I don't see that having happened yet. And what should a person do? Let's say a person had a, let's call it properly, an intuition that was being developed into a hypothesis. Let's say someone had something like that. And it had more explanatory power, more predictive power, more consistency, was coherent within itself, and all of these measurements that we use to justify whether or not something might be true. Say it had all those aspects. Should I abandon it? It not having been disproven? Well, I think if you look at that critically, and I think if it were something besides religion that we were talking about, which most people think involves a lot of woo and magic, I do not. I don't think it's even describing those things. If we were talking about anything else, people would say, no, you should hang on to that intuition. You should develop that. You should test it. You should get confirmation. You should get peer review. You should write papers. You should publish these things. And I've taken that advice, and I wrote a paper on a very small idea within this idea on one story in the Bible because somebody said, hey, you should blah, blah, blah. So I did. And it's yours also. Hey, Peebo. It's yours also if you want it. To review it, to rip it to shreds, to show me all of the reasons why it's not plausible in the definitions. It's not contextual within the story of David and Goliath. It's not possible in our near solar system, in physics and chemistry. You're welcome to show me those things. I invite people to. I've put that paper out to several people, and so far, the return that I get peace and respect. Is it? What should I call you? Fifth trumpet, or is fifth trumpet or something else?
Today, KL is good.
KL today. Now,
yeah, thank you.
Is K? What day of the week is this? KL is good all Tuesdays, or how does that work?
Well, you're supposed to protect your identity and whatnot, so
you should. You should. Now, as for me, I don't protect my identity at all. And B and I had a serious conversation about that. But she uses her actual name as well, and we don't have a whole lot of people besides ourselves depending on ourselves, and have decided to just be fully honest and forthcoming.
Yeah, that's cool.
Is that
so? Congratulations,
that's Peebo, but he's well. Thank you so much. There's an error with that,
What is it? 195.
It's 199.
Someone just unsubscribed.
No, 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 no. No one unsubscribed. No, this is a preemptive show.
Well, that's cool.
I'm counting on people who have subscribed to share something with a friend that they think would really enjoy the madness that I've been living since 2012 and might get someone else to subscribe. And we'll see if that happens. If not, then I'll just be very, very disappointed and go curl up in a corner and cry.
You know, you get a lot of guests. You talk to a lot of people, and they come on your show, and they're happy to talk to you.
Peace and respect, Peebo Thulu.
Hello.
Can
you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Hello, world. So I have no idea what you're talking about other than it's the thing you're about.
Yeah, I'm talking about the thing that I'm about, which is generally what I'm about. And yeah, I'm talking about how I've been trying to disprove this. I mean, I have to argue for it, and I have to argue for it deeply to get to the nitty gritty. But people shouldn't mistake me arguing for it that means that in my mind, it has to be a fact. That's not how it works. That's not how reality works. Just because I'm convinced of something doesn't mean that it's true. It just doesn't.
Yes.
Now, I am thoroughly convinced of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, your comet, how's it going?
It's still on track, doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yes.
As predicted by NASA. Really has nothing to do with me. I mean, I don't know how to, I don't have a good telescope. I don't know how to plot the course of a incoming comet. I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
No, nor do I. My knowledge of astronomy is like Phil Plait. That's about it.
Well,
he's a really cool astronomer, and he likes chicken twisties.
Good news, guys. We just got a little, or at least I just got a little bit of good news. According to Spooky Bedhair, I now have 201 subscribers, making the show true. All right, woo! Because it started as a lie. I only had 109 subscribers when we started, but you guys have already changed that.
You get a lot of guests. I mean, everybody's happy to talk to you. You talk, they all have, you have these long conversations. You have many guests, so you're doing something right.
Well, I think at least people have figured out that I'm serious and that it's not some kind of a ploy. It's not a joke to me. I'm not just doing it for money or for popularity or for social acceptance. I'm not doing it for any of those reasons. I genuinely, nice, I'm trying to get the smartest people on here I can, man. Thank you, Peebo. You're a heck of a nice guy too.
I may identify as an attack helicopter.
What did he say?
I may identify as an attack helicopter. It's a long joke. Doesn't work. The whole identity sort of thing is, yeah. I know. Potentially in poor taste as well.
Okay, I get it. So you're talking about social structures of self-identification. Is that the joke?
Yeah.
Probably
in poor taste. Now, again, that's my sense of humor.
I wonder if people would object if I personally identified as the most brilliant human on the planet. If I identified myself as that, would that be acceptable? Would I have to be treated as such? People should treat me as the smartest human no matter who's born or grows up or whatever, anything. Doesn't matter.
Well, the problem is you'd be joining a long group of people who would be saying that. So
see, I could be in a very popular group then. That would be awesome. The smartest
popularist?
The popularist, yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry to derail your train of thought.
No, it's perfect. We're just having fun. I mean, these hangouts that I do normally turn into something more serious, but it's Odean. Hello, Odean.
Hey, how are you doing?
Peace and respect. How are you?
Great. I'm finally on your show.
Yes, you are. That's amazing. Although we've spoken a bit on Discord before that particular channel fell apart.
Yes, we've had some very interesting conversations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll take it for exactly as it is, not necessarily anything but a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it.
Hey, if I find it interesting, that means it's good in my book. So,
Right on.
but yeah,
Yeah,
sorry
these-
if I derailed you.
No, you're fine. It's fine. We're just winging it. We're just having fun. These hangouts have a tendency to be anyone who wants to come in and tell me why I'm wrong. That's what these normally turn into. So that these make for good conversations as well. Oh, it's Remember Sammy. Hello, Remember. Hello, Wes. How you guys doing? That's what these normally turn into, which is absolutely fine. It's really what the show's all about anyway.
I haven't heard many people do that. I mean, I have heard people do that, but like when you have your guests, they don't usually do that.
We have to watch past 15 minutes, Kale. That was a joke.
Well, from what I've seen, they don't usually do that.
No, that tends to happen after it's run on for a couple hours or something, actually.
Right. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. All right. Who we got here? Full House. Full House, first time ever. There you go.
Hey, Richard.
Peace and respect, Wes and Red.
I just came in and say you're wrong.
Oh, thanks, Red. In fact, you're terribly, horribly wrong, and nothing you say is similar to any kind of reality.
I don't know. What I usually say is like some of the things, some of you're very insightful on a lot of things and very real. And then on some of the stuff, I'll call it fringe stuff. I mean, I can't say that
easily.
it's not going to happen. I mean, how can I say that it's not going to happen? I really can't. But
well, I guess it depends on your metric and what you think is reasonable and what you think is not reasonable. Because, I mean, if I did it this way, if I said our ancestors told us about religions so that we could be prepared for the future and they return, I'm saying alien humans. That's what I'm saying. Okay. So let's compare alien humans to defeating physics. I mean, if you look at it that way, yeah, alien humans, extremely unlikely. I get that. Defeat physics. Never heard of that. Never heard of something defeating physics.
So what does the term mean?
Speak to a flat earther.
Oh boy, tell me about it. I meant actual defeat, not theoretical defeat of physics. What's the term what mean?
Defeating physics.
I mean when Christians say things like Jesus literally walked across the top of H2O in a settled body caused by gravity. When they say things like that, that's the defeat of physics. That's magic. And I don't believe in magic.
Well, yeah, but an angelic body or a spiritual body could do that.
If such a thing were existing, yes.
Okay, if we could prove a spiritual body, which I'm not sure what that means. If we could prove that, then you could say, okay, the spiritual bodies have this natural ability in the nature of what it is to do things like walk on water. That's cool. That's really cool. Unfortunately, it becomes non-special. It becomes every spiritual body would be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not a Christ thing. And why did Peter fall into the water?
Well,
he wasn't his hydrophilic boots wasn't working properly.
Apparently,
repelling the water.
Oh.
I mean, I just know
that's a Pratchett
biblically
joke
speaking,
as well.
like Christ could walk through the wall. He walked out of the tomb, supposedly. Or
oh, wait a minute! Before we move on, I have to correct something. They weren't boots; they were sandals. But moving on.
So when you said he can't walk on water, my first thought was, oh yeah, but I mean, if you were in a spiritual body, if you were transfigured, like on the mountain, you would be in that body. You could do something like that. Although it doesn't say that that's what happened in those verses.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't go into that kind of detail at all. Whereas if I say the waters, which is over pluralized for no apparent reason, actually means spirits of people, then Jesus walking on the water is just Jesus leading the people. In which case,
he's like a sheepdog running across the top of the sheep. Awesome.
Yeah, something like that. Only figuratively, but not running on the sheep. Maybe more like crowd surfing, something like that. Jesus was a crowd surfer. That's what I think. And then Peter goes, yo, I'm cool too. But unfortunately, he plays the ukulele and nobody ever actually thought he was cool. So he tries it, and the crowd's just like, and he falls and becomes one of them, which is why he lost his faith, because the people there are not faithful.
He
And
took
that's the
his
whole
eyes off
point of
Christ.
it. Yeah, that's a widely scholarly accepted view of how to read that. So I can't disagree that your view isn't popular. It is. I just don't think that's what the text is describing. Because first of all, it involves the defeating of physics, and I don't think that's possible in any scenario. Now, there can be technology we don't understand. That's fine, but there can't be the actual defeat of physics. You see what I'm saying? Because then you're into things that you get into the reasons why there are people who are atheists, because they
Like
look
me.
at it and they go, well, that's not possible.
It is possible if you invoke Clark's law.
Oh, I can't wait. Teach me.
Clark's law. Anything of a high enough technology, if presented to us without us knowing about it, effectively is the
Okay.
same as magic.
Okay, I agree with
Yeah.
that. In fact, I've quoted that loosely without having read it.
Yeah. So,
Just heard people say that.
the classic example in Star Trek is the Q out of the Next Generation. Their
Right.
technology is so advanced that they're rewriting physics on the fly with whatever technology they have.
Right.
Or Thor in the Marvel movies. It's just such high technology that it appears as magic to us.
Right.
I think there's a difference between appearing as magic and real magic.
There's no
That
such
can't
thing as
exist.
real
So,
magic, though.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's my point in it.
Yeah, but if
Exactly
we
my
don't know
point.
how it works, then we can put it in the box of it's magic. Like
Sure.
the whole walking on water, if the person that is Jesus is from a technological society that has finally figured out the nuts and bolts of the Higgs boson, then he's got a harness that is anti-gravity. So he's walking across the top of water because he can actually manipulate gravity. Possible. Well,
Theoretically.
yeah, that's all the sci-fi tropes. That's why they walk around on the deck on Star Trek, because they can manipulate gravity and have gravitic deck plates.
Sure, why not?
Yes, but currently we don't know how to actually harness the physics to do that, because we've only just discovered the Higgs boson in the last 4 or 5 years tops.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a wonderful chat talk by Neil deGrasse Tyson where he basically shows that. So I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was sticking electrodes into frogs' legs and making them twitch.
Right.
And that was the 18 something. It took to the 1900s, the early 1900s, I think, for people like Edison and such to start lighting light bulbs from theory to application. And then in the early 1900s, you had the weirdness that is quantum physics. Well, here we are 100 years later, and we have light-emitting diodes that no one blinks an eye at, but they're the actual application of quantum mechanics. They're light being generated without heat. So in another 100 years from the Higgs boson, we'll get applications based on that physics of whatever turns out.
So here's the scary part. If the word waters means people or things people experience, and if it doesn't, there's a line in the Bible that's just absolutely stupid and obvious, and nobody would argue with this. If it's talking about H2O, there's a line that says, "O proud waters, thou shalt come to the shore and no further." I don't see any reason for that line to be there, because I've never heard of a lake crawling out of its basin. Just never heard of it.
No. Couldn't it be like what happens up in the Great Lakes between America and Canada, where the you get ice or slush forming on the surface of the Great Lakes, and then because of the way the wind works, excuse me, it literally pushes the slush, like you get huge sand dune looking things just invading onto the shore, and there's like, to the people on shore, there's no wind, there's nothing, but all of a sudden you have this ice just grinding in at them.
That might be technically correct according to the text. Does it get past the shore?
Oh yeah, there's some great YouTube clips of these things happening. I'm
How
glad I'm
far does
living
this
in a
stuff
country
get?
where where water doesn't do that.
Right.
Yes, we have to have tropical cyclones to make the ocean get onto the land.
Right. So in the other not specialty case view, which I love the story anyway. That was interesting. In the it is, but it's kind of specialty situation. I think if it means people, then what it's talking about is us finding the shore of our basin or the planet. And here we are, very close to getting to space exploration for all the reasons you mentioned and many more. So if I take the word shore there to mean, say, maybe low orbit or near space, and then off of the shore of the waters, off of its natural basin, would be some kind of deep space exploration, and we're just getting closer and closer and closer to that. If that's a proper reading of it, that makes me say that we are not going to ourselves explore deep space, with our fleshly bodies, but God would return before that.
Well, you can with energetics.
With what?
So, well, if we'd built the Orion back in the 60s and launched it even as a Valve computer-driven probe, it would be getting to Alpha Centauri by now, which is 5 light years away.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So would you count robots as extensions of our earthly bodies, like what's running around on Mars at the moment?
You could argue that, couldn't you? But no, I think it means our fleshly bodies in some kind of like actual massive amount, like some good sized portion of us or something. Some good sized portion. Like, I don't think we'll get 1% off the planet actually ever.
You don't need to get 1% off. You only need to get about 10,000. I think the number is 10,000 for a good gene pool mix.
That seems about right. That's what I would have done.
Yeah, and you can just so there's a wonderful that was printed back in the 80s, a classic Japanese artist. It's called 2001 Nights. So it's a play on the Arabian Nights. Okay. And it's a series of collected short stories. And in one of them, over the collected anthologies, you actually have some stories that sort of weave through. And the author creates one where they launch a generational ship to some other habitable planet that they find with telescopes. Mm-hmm. And the story that you see first is children being raised. Like, you see the ship come into orbit. He's a really good illustrator. The ship comes into orbit, drops the landers, and then the children are raised by this couple. Mm-hmm. But it's not until I think the second or third book where he revisits the story, and of course the couple are synthetic androids, and the children have been raised from test tubes. Sorry.
It's a very interesting premise.
Well, it's like with the technology they launched at the time, because the other fold in is that, I think even Star Trek actually went it with Carl Noonien Singh. So again, going back to the Orion. So say we launched a generation ship with the Orion, which the upper end scale for that is like 8 million tons worth of vessel, and it heads out at say 0.05 the speed of light to something a bit further than Alpha Centauri. So 100 years down the track, where our application of physics has moved on, we may, like the Alakubra drive, may become a thing. So you'll actually have warp ships overtaking the generational ships, because the warp ships can cheat and travel faster than light. And then you've got the ethical dilemma. So you have this generational ship that's been in transit for 100 years. The warp ship can catch up to it. Right. Is it ethical to interact with the generational ship?
Was it
Because
launched by
they're-
the same planet?
Yes.
Okay. Do they have
So-
conflicting missions?
No. So the generational ship is launched from Earth to, say, wherever the big blue people live in Avatar, and it takes that generational
that
ship
movie.
100. It's graphically beautiful. It's Pocahontas in space. The plotline sucks.
I like
I hope-
Pocahontas in space, though.
I hope he gets to do better with his sequels. He gets more control and takes it back from the people behind. Anyway, so the generational ship is sent out, and it's going to take 200 years to get to the other planet.
Okay.
In 75 years, the home planet makes warp drive or hyperdrive. They can now get to that destination in a week.
Okay.
So they take off. They catch up with the generational ship as it's halfway.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ethical for the warp ship to interact with the generational ship? Because here are people who are off to discover something new when the warp ship, which is caught up to them halfway, can just zip on ahead in a couple of days, scan the planet, come back and say, hey, look what you would have found.
I would say it's disappointing to the older one. It's not unethical one bit. It's just.
But the whole purpose of the first ship is now moot. It's like, other than the warp ship taking them there and cutting 100 years off the trip, you know what I mean? It's
So-
just one of the things.
Personal
raised.
secretaries in the post office are now moot too, but
Yeah.
What?
I said personal secretaries in the post office are now outdated.
What's a post office?
Oh yeah, like that. Sorry, I'm kind of old. You'll forgive me.
No. We used to have them, but ours obviously didn't work the way yours do. Actually, we still have them. There's just less of them, and they still don't work the way yours do. Different system, different government.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Oh, I'm sure you're sure.
But that Orion
that
thing
wouldn't be unethical. Just disappointing to those. Besides, didn't you say those who took the long journey were like probably androids?
Oh no, that was a different story.
Oh, okay.
Or no, because it's been so long since I read the graphic novels, the linear graphic material, that there's quite a few different plays on that trope, on that, because of time dilation can do really weird things and so on and so forth.
And you mentioned some kind of propulsion system. I've never heard those words put together in my life.
Which was?
I don't know. I've only heard it once in my life. I literally can't remember what you'd said. You were talking
Was it the warp ship or the generational ship?
It would have been applied to the warp ship.
Alacuba drive.
That's what you said.
So it's an actual physicist who, inspired by Star Trek, actually said, okay, let's crunch the numbers on the physics on bending space.
Mm-hmm.
To which his initial maths, which maths is hard and I don't do maths, he realized by invoking unobtainium that you can put enough energy into the system to warp reality. And so you bend space time, and you ride that wave of. So if you're familiar with the bowling ball on the trampoline, to illustrate gravity wells, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of a bowling ball, you can alter the shape of the rubber that is representative of space-time, yeah?
Right.
So you can, at one point, pinch that rubber and lift it up
Right.
behind the spaceship, and then in front of the spaceship, you can grab the rubber, pinch it, and pull it down. So now you've got a standing wave.
Right.
And now you can flex the rubber and make that standing wave move
Push the
through
ship.
space and time. And it will push the ship. And because it's affecting space-time itself,
Mhm.
it can move faster than the speed of light.
Theoretically,
Yeah,
yeah, I
because
guess it could.
space.
It's
Yeah, because space
changing.
is the only thing that can move faster than the speed of light.
Well, that's where the I can't remember the gravity detectors. The reason they're so important is because they showed that the effects of gravity waves travel at the speed of light.
The effect of gravity waves travel at the speed of light.
Yes.
Interesting.
Well, until they built the detectors, the LIGO detectors, they weren't sure.
The what
Since
detectors?
LIGO, LIGO. See, that's the thing. Before LIGO actually did the hard tests, then they weren't, because light is affected by the space-time that it's moving through. Hence why when you're sitting right next to a black hole, time dilation gets really bad for you. Your time doesn't change, but anyone outside of that reference, bless you, or curse you, keep everything balanced. Anyone standing outside of that reference sees you slow down.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's until they actually found gravity waves and had things to measure them against. Well, I think they measured them against either black holes merging or stars exploding, which are pretty dramatic things in reality. They weren't sure how space-time, you know what I mean?
No, but it's interesting. I'm completely lost.
No. So you're familiar with the time dilation?
Very, very, very briefly and basically.
Have you ever
Yeah,
heard the term "time is relative"? That's kind of like, so basically when it says time is relative, right, is that the flow of time for you, even to you, it might seem normal, like nothing is necessarily changed, even though you might be moving faster through space, for example, right? To a different observer, you're moving super fast, right? But time, in terms of how you experience it, it remains the same, but
To each of the
time
two
is,
observers.
huh?
To each of the two observers, time moved normally.
Yes, but
Okay.
technically speaking, the guy who's moving faster, for example, right, who's at a different location, time is, time in that particular situation, right, time is moving significantly faster for them, but for
Actually,
you,
slower.
well, yes, slower. That's what I meant. That's why that's where the dilation comes in. So the difference in the flow of time, so to speak, changes depending on the positioning, the reference, and how fast
Speed.
you move.
This is
Yeah.
obviously what Quicksilver is taking advantage of.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, cool.
that's a good one.
And again, gravity, the amount of gravity well that you're in affects how you experience time. So we here on standing on the surface of the Earth, time moves at whatever our clocks currently measure it at. Whereas if you go to orbit, because they're further out of the gravity well, time moves, and I can't remember off the top of my head whether it's faster or slower, but there's a difference, and that's measurable, and that's why they have to factor that into the satellites that work on your GPS.
I've heard that's the best
I've heard
verification
that.
we have for our observations is that you have to actually use it.
Yeah.
Or nothing works
Yes.
out.
Yeah, but they knew back when they were throwing satellites at Venus and Mars and all that sort of thing as well.
Yeah,
Why were they throwing satellites at Venus?
the Russians.
Because they wanted to land on Venus and see what was under the clouds, because they were still working out how to throw probes that could read the surface with radar. And the Russian probe lasted, was it 15 minutes?
Yeah, then it died
Something like
out. They actually have pictures.
It melted and
Venus.
got crushed. It didn't just die out.
Yeah.
That's dying. That's
Well, no, Spirit rovers have died, but hey, we can go and erect a museum around them. We're not really doing that for the thing that dropped onto Venus, or the
Mhm.
couple we've dropped onto Venus.
What was the temperature estimated at, or something close to the temperature
It
estimate?
melts lead.
Yeah,
Like
it's like
lead melts. Like lead would be a liquid if you threw it out into the atmosphere, and it's the pressure as if you're standing at the bottom of the ocean or something.
And then
Mariana Trench.
gold would too, and then our circuits have gold on them. Yes.
Hey,
Oh, there's a really so what NASA is proposing is dropping an ambulatory rover onto Venus that works on clockwork. It'll be a steampunk World War I looking tank looking thing.
That is cool.
Cogwheel brains and Babbage.
can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
LG. It's a little off subject, but you might know the answer. Like, why is it that Venus, when we look up at it, why is it so bright? Like, if it's that far away, even Jupiter, like, how is it?
albedo effect?
Yeah, but I mean, it just doesn't, to me, just as a layman, it doesn't seem to make sense that
Could
would
you
be
not
able
talk
to see.
about things quite that personal on like a? I mean, this is supposed to be a kid-friendly show. That word you just used there, and totally
Venus?
inappropriate. No.
What word? Venus?
The one Peebo
Jupiter?
said. The
Albedo.
Albe something.
When we look at the moon, to us it appears white. Yeah.
Well, sort of white. Yeah, off gray,
Yeah.
white.
Whereas if you actually see, how would you the actual regolith on the moon is actually a really dirty grey,
Right.
but the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, and so you have 100% of the solar, the
The light.
sun's energy hitting that surface, and even though it's a dirty grey, and it's only reflecting, like 5% of that energy, that's still a lot of energy making it back to Earth. And so to us, so Venus is surrounded by clouds, and clouds are generally...
Time out right there. That's perfect. Time out right there. Does everybody know Jefferson? Does everybody know Jeff Spetch?
Well, sort of.
his
I
avatar.
don't. But as
I
I
don't know.
mentioned, I don't think we met yet.
I'd love to right now be able to sample the collective IQ of people on the screen. That would be impressive. Of course, my score would probably bring you guys down a little bit. But okay, let's keep going. Okay, albedo effect.
So clouds reflect a frequency of light. That's why to us they appear white. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Venus. So the Earth. If you're in the International Space Station and you're above a really big storm front, you're going to get a lot more solar radiation light coming off those white clouds, because that's what's reflected. Yeah. So the entirety of Venus is covered in clouds, and so its amount of reflected light off that surface is many times higher than even the moon, which is a dirty grey. And so over the distance between Earth and Venus, that's just so much more reflective light being bounced off the clouds of Venus.
So it, like, with your scientific mind, it makes sense to you that you could see Jupiter and even Saturn?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
you can. I'm just wondering.
So, okay.
Can.
So here's a simple explanation as to how light works when they hit objects. Like, take for example, an apple, right? When light hits an apple, it'll absorb all the different light particles except for the ones that are in the red frequency, and so that's why whenever
What about
the
green
red
apples?
light hits your eyes, that's
Then
how
it's
it prepared. That's how it appears red to you. Now for the moon, because of the, I guess, the makeup of the moon, when the sunlight hits it, right, it actually doesn't absorb a ton of that light, believe it or not. What it does is that it reflects a ton of it, and that's why it appears very, very bright. But there are parts of the moon, for example, where the light isn't hitting, and this is where you will see these well, the light hits it, but not so much. And this is why you'll see like these patches depending on the position and stuff like that. You'll see these gray patches. As for Venus, what's his name gave a pretty in-depth, pretty accurate explanation as to like how that works.
Mhm.
So the color of the atmosphere, for example, right? The
Is it
reason why
blue?
the sky is blue is it's literally because of the light from the sun interacting with the particles that make up our atmosphere. And so
Walter Rayleigh scattering.
yes, thank you. And so that's why it appears blue to us, right?
Do we have some doubt as to whether or not the human eye can pick out Venus? Also,
I do. I watch it
Jupiter
set
also?
every night. I watch it set every night because I live on the bottom of the planet and I can do that.
How you're staying on there, we're not sure, but
Higgs
pretty
boson.
cool that you can see that.
Hey, boots.
Oh, interestingly,
Velcro.
So they're going to be sending out a probe. Well, I guess technically it's not a probe, but a satellite that's going to study the sun, and they have this super new material that can resist a ton of heat. So if that works out really well, they'll be able to use that material on the probe that they send to Venus next.
Awesome.
Yep.
But isn't it just the material surviving the heat, but isn't it also a problem of them radiating away the energetic heat energy that hits said probe? So they'll have to have really good radiators as well, yeah?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll engineer that, and yes, like pressure is a major issue, also because you'll have to reinforce the crap out of that probe.
Well, from what the plans I've seen is the probe won't have anything delicate. It will all be like it won't even be thinking, for want of a better term. It will be relying on literal cogwheels to do its processing, and then then there'll be a probe in orbit firing a radar beam at the little mechanical probe, and then that radar beam will be interacting with like physical mirrors and other complicated stuff, and so the brains of the probe will actually be in orbit, remote controlling the mechanical probe. So all the delicate electronical stuff, that was a technical term, will be safely in space.
Calm down. You're losing us, man. That is really steampunk. That really is. That's pretty cool sounding.
Yes. So I hope they get the funding to do it.
And people all over the world who wear top hats today will lose their minds. Yes, sir. That'll be fun. Next question. The panel answers questions.
So Jefferson, who's got his mute muted,
He's muted, right?
He can say hello and all that sort of thing.
What's up? Sorry.
There you go. He speaks.
We just wanted to make sure you were an actual voice, you know.
Oh yeah, sorry. There's some background noise going on, so I'm gonna keep my mic muted.
I have a question. It's kind of off topic, but the guy on the very bottom, is he in a church or is that a green screen? Can't tell.
Green screen.
That's his backyard garden. That's a famous painting, actually.
Yeah,
He's made time for us during his orgy, so
something like that. That's Plato and Socrates, or Plato and Aristotle back there in the center, and then it has all the other philosophers. It's a famous painting. Has all the other philosophers back then sitting around and doing nothing but sitting around mainly.
The only way that could have been better, Wes, is if you had cut from the collar, front and back, to your lower left-hand side, under the armpit of that T-shirt, and just removed that portion. That would have been awesome. That would have been totally awesome.
You have beef with a particular philosopher?
Myself or Wes?
Yourself.
Yeah.
Do I have
Oh,
a beef,
no.
beef with any particular philosopher? Let's see. Sean Carroll.
Does that
Also,
count?
William Lane Craig. I got a big problem with him.
Yeah, I
Frank
do.
Turek. I got a problem with that guy. There's a couple
Yeah.
of them.
Okay.
I don't
so-
consider them philosophers very much, but
Well, it depends on who you ask, doesn't it? You
but
ask
it does
them.
depend who you ask.
You ask
If you
them,
ask
they're
them,
philosophers.
Wouldn't it rely on the consensus of other philosophers?
I think it's pretty safe to say William Lane Craig
Perhaps.
is a philosopher, even if you disagree with him.
Yeah, he
Oh, yeah.
did the schooling and all of that stuff. So I guess technically he is.
He's technically a
Isn't everybody a
philosopher, but
philosopher then? Too? Couldn't you say anybody that wants to say they're a philosopher could be a philosopher then, as well?
yeah, there's
I
no
mean, it
real,
really
there's no
depends.
real like peer review in philosophy, is there?
I
Hmm.
thought there was. That's why you went to university to get your doctorate in philosophy.
There
And
is.
so to do a
True,
doctorate,
true.
you have
Well,
to.
sure, there's that route, but who
What I
does that?
understood of
And
a doctorate, you have to actually advance the field somehow. That's what justifies your doctorate. But I could be wrong.
That's a perspective that I would consider as one definition, something anyway. Some people go too far, I think, saying everybody's a philosopher. I don't think everybody is because not everybody's very rigorous in their thinking
but doesn't everyone have a philosophy?
at all.
Yes, but having a philosophy
Yeah,
is different
I
to being a
do, but-
philosopher.
Yeah,
It's like everyone can have a car, but not everyone is a car mechanic.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's good put. Well put.
I mean you can philosophize.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm philosophizing all the time, getting older. Boom, boom. Some morning it's impossible to get out of bed.
Oof.
I would put it this way: I can change the oil in my car, but I wouldn't call myself an engineer.
yeah,
That's a pretty good analogy.
that's well.
So how do we decide if we're ready to design our own engine for our car? How do we know something like that?
I mean, let's see.
If it
What
works,
sort
and
of
doesn't
engine are you
blow up.
talking about, though? Because there are so many different types. Like turbine.
Jordan Peterson's a psychologist, not a philosopher, isn't he?
Sorry,
He may
who?
be both. I don't know.
Who? Sorry.
Jordan Peterson.
He's better known as a psychologist, psychiatrist, whichever one he is.
Yeah.
Isn't he the one that can dispense mental help, but he can't dispense drugs? Because I always get confused which one can do which.
Yeah, me too.
Psychiatrists can give meds. A psychologist can only.
Yeah, I don't think he can
Give
give
therapy.
meds. Yeah, I don't think he can
I
give
believe
meds.
Jordan Peterson has a PhD in psychology, so he's on the academic side, not the medical side.
Yeah.
So about the engine and how we would know if we were actually knew what we were doing.
Depends on the engine. Like most of the engines we have are heat engines, so it's like internal combustion engines, and it depends on your level of efficiency that you want. Do you want a Stirling engine? Do you want a internal combustion engine? Do you want to have a turbine? Giving up the scales of
If you're just
Well,
offering, I'll take a Stirling engine, please, because those things are awesome theoretically.
they're really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to brief the dumb guy? Anybody?
They work on heat differentials. Basically, if you have an area that's really, really cold and an area that's really, really hot, then they can use that difference in temperature as a potential, and you can get motive force out of it by it's basically air pump sort of thing. But the horsepower to thermal difference is not that great, and I don't know. It's less than a steam engine, hence why Stirling proposed his Stirling engine first, and people went, wow, whiz bang, but the amount of difference you need between the temperature and all that sort of thing can't do that much work.
Nope.
And then they harnessed the power of steam, which is a percentage more horsepower per weight, yada yada. And then
So like a 1,000-pound robot based on this system is probably pretty good at putting away dishes. Something like that.
Something like that.
Okay.
It doesn't have enough power to crush a dish. That's probably the problem with it. Like,
no, it's perfect for dishes. That's perfect.
Theoretically, the Stirling engine, I mean, if you extrapolate it out far enough, you can actually get to this kind of concept of like a perpetual motion machine.
Mm.
So even if it's lower energy, it's perpetual motion. The problem is it's never been efficient enough to do that either. So unfortunately, it's a failure both ways. But,
well, where the application sort of comes in handy is you can use it to recapture waste heat.
yes, and
So
actually,
everything you have
isn't that
generates.
Sorry to interrupt, but wasn't that kind of the philosophy behind the braking systems that they installed in a lot of more recent versions of cars? They're designed to kind of recapture energy that they're using.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But it's like when you have the heat transfer, the heat vents on the server farms. You know, that heat that's just washing off into the atmosphere. Well, if you bolt a Stirling engine to the top of those heat vents, then you can capture some of that waste heat energy and turn it into a spinny wheel that then can drive an electric generator.
Totally off topic, but Richard, the comment that you just highlighted, am I not turtle enough for your turtle club, turtle, is that from Master of Disguise, the Dana Carvey bomb?
It has to be. It has to be. I love that.
Okay. I can't believe I remembered that reference, but
it has nothing to do with anything. It's so perfect.
I apologize to whomever was speaking last, but I had to point that out because I was stunned that I caught the reference.
Sorry. Okay, so it can recapture and put it back in the system.
A little bit, yes. Because you can't beat entropy. That's just the universe is winding down to a potential heat death.
Yep. Entropy is that just universal kick between the legs that we all have to deal with.
What if entropy and heat death are an eventuality of everything that we observe, and we are looking at a 16.5 billion light year bubble, and that's all that we can see. And for whatever reason right now, we believe that is all there is to see, and we're actually incorrect, and we're looking at a small bubble. What if that?
That is incorrect. We are looking at a small bubble, but that's not.
Well, people have just said inaccurate things to me. Sorry.
No. That, like, from what little I understand, is what we can currently see is not all that there is to see. It's just that, given how the speed of light is limited to the speed of light, but the expansion of reality is not limited to the speed of light, and hence the dark matter, which is pushing everything away from everything else at really, really large scales.
Dark
eventually,
energy.
we'll. Energy, matter is what's holding galaxies together. Eventually, I can't remember how many billions of years in the future, when we look out from our galaxy, we won't see any other galaxies.
Right. Because everything's too far away, moving too fast, and the light's not getting here.
Yep. The light, okay. The light. Well, the light's trying to get here, but
it's working really hard. I understand.
The space time between them is moving apart faster than the light can cross.
Well, hey, thank you guys for your time, but maybe I'll let some other scientist who wants to come in and get in the room.
A real scientist in here would be great. I'm not one.
Yeah, definitely not one.
No, none of us are, actually, I think.
All right, well, thanks, Richard. Talk to you later. Bye.
Peace and respect, Kale. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so where was that?
We were the distance, but so when we look out, we can see the first light from when there was light, before there was actual galaxies. That's what the very background radiation is, I think.
Right.
Because we're looking back 13 billion years in time as well as distance. Yeah. So the Earth is, what,
I believe
13
that's right.
million years old? And as we can see away to 13 billion, rough numbers.
13.8.
And
wait,
then,
what? 13.8 is the most current number on what?
so
Well, 13.7, 13.8 is always what I see here. I don't know if they agree very much. There's two ways I know that they have calculated the universe, and they don't match up. But I have no theories on why or anything else.
that's why they postulated.
That's the number that.
Yeah, that's why they postulated
matches up, yeah.
the age of inflation
Yeah.
at the very,
Yeah.
very beginning, because those two
Yeah,
numbers, or whatever they are, don't match up. And they go, something has to account for this discrepancy. And their current placeholder is. So you've got the point where reality. Well, you've got us now, and you go back in time, and things get closer and closer together till they get to a point where our knowledge of physics just stops working.
Yeah.
And that point
Singularity is what they call it, but that gets to be a
That's-
confusing word. Where, from my understanding, just means it's a mathematical situation where things get all messy. Is all it means. It doesn't mean much else, from my understanding.
Yes, and it's gone. So from that point, it expands, and then it's still so much energy that all you have are subatomic particles, because there's more energy in that state than we can generate in the Large Hadron Collider, and it just keeps expanding, and the overall energy drops, and so you go from subatomic particles. They lose enough energy to clump together to become atomic particles, and then things continue to expand. The energy level continues to drop, and then those particles start coming together to form atoms. So on.
Don't forget about the antimatter that was formed and the annihilation that took.
And then that's the problem, is that, so theoretically, as those particles form, there's nothing to determine which way they spin, for want of a better thing. So you'll have electrons and positrons forming as the energy level lowers. Well, as soon as an electron and a positron touch each other, they convert themselves back into energy. So theoretically, there shouldn't have been anything. It should have just stayed energy as these positive and negative particles touched each other. But something happened, and we have, as far as we can see, nothing but our normal matter. But we can generate antimatter, which they do in some of the big colliders. And that's
I've heard
where
that
they
too,
then,
and I don't know how they do that at all. But it's really interesting.
really
how
big
they-
hammer and smash things.
Yeah, and they're trying to contain it somehow. I don't understand how you contain antimatter, but that's
If
just
it's got a
amazing. Something
charge,
amazing.
you can use magnets to. So an
Yeah,
electron has a
between
negative
it.
charge, and so you can constrain electrons with magnets.
Yeah, and
So
hold it, suspend it, and
yeah, and so with the positron, you can do the same, and as long as it's in the magnetic field, it's not touching anything physical. And then
Yeah.
as you bolt your positrons and your electrons and your neutrons together to make antiparticles, if your antiparticle of hydrogen has a charge, you can then hold that anti-hydrogen in a magnetic field, and you can just keep making more anti-hydrogen and putting more of it together until you get a cloud of anti-hydrogen.
That sounds
Which
like it
the
would be
guy
a
who
really big
proposed-
battery.
No. Well, yes.
It would take a really big
Yes.
storage device to do something like that, I would think.
Well, the guy who they brought on board to do some of the technical details for Avatar, which is the movie you really, really like, he proposed a starship called the Valkyrie, which uses, basically, if you see pictures of the Valkyrie, it has these big round spheres, and they hold some of the they hold, I think, the matter that they interact with the antimatter to pump out the drives. But basically, his solution to get around the problem is you make your anti-hydrogen, you make a cloud of anti-hydrogen, you then cool the anti-hydrogen down till it becomes a solid, so we're talking 15th of nothing above absolute zero, and then you hold snowflakes of anti-hydrogen in a magnetic field.
Have you heard of the ion propulsion engine?
They're fantastic, and they have the push power of a feather.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
For now.
for now.
It's
Yeah.
the way the physics works.
You know what's
I
funny?
just heard it a while back. Thought it was amazing. So
What's amazing is propelling spacecraft using nukes.
Yes, the Orion.
Apparently, yes,
Yes,
dude.
8 million tons worth of ship back in the 60s.
yeah,
It's apparently. Well, I'll see if I can even find that article probably a little bit
Wait,
later.
is this something Trump said?
No, this is something that was proposed a long time ago
Back in the
that they
60s.
actually considered. Yes.
Well, sorry.
Sounds like a Trumpism to me. I don't know.
No. It's, so after the Second World War comes around, the Americans spend a huge percentage of their GDP accelerating their understanding of atomic physics. They go from making the first atomic pile in a basketball court to making the tall boy and the fat boy, which they then proceed to drop on two unfortunately unsuspecting Japanese cities. And after they'd done that, they only had one bomb in reserve. So if neither of those bombs had actually worked through technical difficulties, they would have been down to one atomic bomb. So
FYI,
the war ends.
The big boy, I'm probably going to misquote this. 1.63% of the fuel went off.
Yes, because of the way
Yeah.
it was built. That's
That is so scary.
That's just the efficiency of the atomic energy. It's like so we don't use bows and arrows anymore. We use gunpowder. Well, sorry, we use smokeless cordite powder because chemical energy gives you 100 times more power than physical energy. Whereas if you go to atomic energy, you increase above your chemical energy by another 100 times. So instead of 100 rail cars of coal, you only need one rail car of nuclear material, uranium, to get the equivalent amount of energy work out of it.
You know what's funny? What's funny is that we can literally use rocks to power whole cities. That's freaking amazing, dude. Fucking rocks.
Physics.
Pretty crazy.
And with rods of the gods, we can use rocks to wipe out cities.
Oh yes.
Yes. Anything
Seems we're
traveling
actually
more
better
than
at that part.
well, yeah, anything traveling more than I think it's 9 kilometers a second. When it hits something else, just converts its mass into blam.
Hmm.
You want to tell what rods of the gods are?
So basically, you use a very big rocket to invest a lot of chemical energy in accelerating a mass into orbit, where it has to be traveling faster than 9.8 meters per second. Now it's sitting, it's falling, but never falling to the Earth. But if you attach a rocket to that mass that's sitting in orbit and you decelerate it, it will fall back with the energy you've invested to put it up there, which is a lot. So the silver bullet that comes out of the end
During
of
the Cold War, the United States.
Sorry, well, the silver bullet,
Huh?
just a comparison of speed. So the silver bullet, the tungsten rod that comes out of the end of an Abrams barrel is only traveling at 2.5 times the speed of sound.
Mm-hmm.
To get something into orbit, you need to be doing about 6 to 7 times the speed of sound. And so instead of something coming at you at 2.5 times the speed of sound, it's coming at you at 6 to 7.
Because
and
as it falls and accelerates.
yeah, and it's just got a bucket ton, almost used a naughty word, of energy to start with. Well, that ties back into Einstein's E equals mc squared.
Mm-hmm.
No. What's the one with its velocity? Anyway, in there's an equation for
36 or 38
the velocity.
per second.
Yeah. The velocity is what the velocity is what squares generating the energy. So the faster you move, it actually builds up exponentially with the energy imparted into that.
Yeah, basically. It's interesting. They call them rods from God. And so in like I think it's like 1967, basically the United States wanted to set up these satellites holding these rods in space with the intent that if war breaks out, they could use these rods to just annihilate like pretty much wherever they wanted. And what makes them even more dangerous than nuclear weapons is that they can penetrate up to like, I don't know, like how much feet? It's a couple. Basically, your bunkers would be useless.
Yes.
Like if you have bunkers.
Wasn't it essentially like a giant upscaled railgun fired at the
No, it doesn't
No,
even
they're
need,
literal rods.
Yeah, no, it doesn't need to be a railgun because you're using the orbital speed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The amount of energy you've used. Sorry.
So essentially, it's in a way, it's just dropped with the slingshot force of the basic spin of the planet.
Well, yeah, or potentially, if you do it right, it's coming in against the spin of the planet.
So
yes.
Basically, what you're doing is you're firing a beam that's big enough to simulate a small meteorite or asteroid.
No, it's not a beam. It's literally a rod.
You're artificially making a meteorite.
I'm sure when he said beam, he meant like I-beam. Like some kind of metal rod.
Yeah, it's a rod. Well, yeah, it can be any shape you want.
But the impact that you're dropping on it is essentially you're shooting a guided meteorite, but it's artificial.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically,
what are these things made out of?
Anything you want. Anything
you want. It just has to be really hard to survive re-entry.
Yeah, because if it's not the right material, it will ablate via the friction and energy through the atmosphere as it comes in.
Yep.
Which is actually how heat shields work.
Oblate as in like become like the shape of a red blood cell or raindrop, something like that? Is that what that means?
Evaporate with intensity.
Okay.
And that's how heat shields work. That's how the early heat shields worked on the Apollos and that when they came in. The thing on the bottom of the capsule, it's melting and taking away energy faster than that energy is seeping through into the astronauts inside the capsule.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, I think, what's going to be on the bottom of the Dragon that they launch tomorrow your time, but because I'm in the 27th now, so.
Wait, where do we ever get a physical Dragon, and how do you launch one?
The Dragon capsule that's going up to the International Space Station by SpaceX.
Wow, you really like this stuff. What's the Dragon capsule?
So they've launched and they've had a test. So I can't remember how many people it's able to carry, but when they launch it with people, it will be carrying 2. One of which was actually he was the commander of the last shuttle flight. So good on him. It's Elon Musk's SpaceX. So they have the rockets that can launch themselves, and then the booster flips around and comes back and lands on the barge. Well, they've built a capsule for humans that they put on the top of that.
Not this human.
Well, eventually, and again, this is just the small step once they get this happening, it will bring the price of putting object kilograms into orbit. It'll bring that price down. The next rocket he wants to build up from the current ones he's building is the BFG, BFR, big fantastic rocket, or you can insert any other word for F in the middle of that. So the current Falcons run with, I think, 5 engines in the bottom of them.
Mm-hmm.
The Starship that he plans on building, I think, will run with 27. So the thing he plans on building will eclipse a Saturn V.
I'm trying to think of another word that starts with F, and all I can get to is fellatio. So it's a weird name for it. But
rockets are very, very phallic. So
that on the Dragon capsule, will it also include like a music box filled with a lock of Grimes' hair? You know, because this is coming from. Maybe not.
Grimes.
That was such a reference. You're gonna have to explain. Sorry.
Elon Musk is married to Grimes. They have an odd relationship, at least from what I can tell. So
they have an odd named child too.
What did they ever decide on the name of the child?
Yeah, it's a few letters. It probably comes across quite elegantly once you can pronounce it, but I've just seen it and gone, okay, that's exotic.
So it ends up getting pronounced as the artist formerly known as My Child.
Something like that. It's like Moon Unit Zappa.
Yeah, or sequence. That's what they'll end up saying. How does that pronounce? Sequence. That's all it is. It's just a sequel of letters, alphanumeric code. It doesn't necessarily mean a thing. But it's our child, so it's meaningful to us as a child, not as a name.
Charles Schultz did that years ago with a character named Five in Peanuts cartoon.
Okay.
His dad was sick of the system and named the kid Five because he was the 5th kid.
There you go.
Works. Names are just arbitrary in the long run. One would have guessed that short names are better because it helps more when you're saying, hey, Fred, duck, as opposed to a longer name.
Ooh. Ricky Tiki Timbo, No Say Rimbo, Cherry Berry, Ruchi Pip, Perry Pimbo.
Oh, too late, he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
I think
the
I read
dragon.
that when I was probably the most recent time I could have read that. I would have been 10.
You've done well. So there, that was the dragon capsule. So it launches soon.
Dragon capsule.
Yep. As I said, they did the tests to make sure that the escape system would work, so that if something goes wrong, they can get the astronauts off the failing rocket. That was quite dramatic. And the rocket that they launched that off, because it no longer had the aerodynamic capsule on the front, then proceeded to fail spectacularly as the aerodynamic forces tore it to pieces. Then they launched, I'm not sure if they refurbished that capsule, but then they launched a robot, like an unmanned capsule, to the International Space Station with cargo to show that the capsule could get to the space station and dock and undock and re-enter and survive landing with all intact, so they had a dry run, but they still were productive with it. And as I said, within hours they will be the United States will be launching astronauts off their own soil. You won't be borrowing Russian hardware, which you've done since the shuttle was retired.
Yep.
Did not know
Yay
that.
for Elon Musk. Our Lord and
He's
Savior.
stealing the weather satellite bandwidth to launch his internet system, which is a bit annoying.
Eh,
Well,
he's kind of
currently
an asshole, so.
Yeah, he's currently launching lots and lots of little satellites that will act as lots and lots of antennas. That means wherever you are on the planet, you will get good internet access.
Mm-hmm.
And the frequency that's running at is what's called 5G.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there aren't really many free, vacant frequencies. We're really good at using them all up.
Yeah.
And so the group that was mainly using the 5G frequency were our meteorologists, because that's what they were running all of their weather satellites with. And Elon Musk's come along and said, well, there's bugger all weather satellites, which is true. I'm going to put up all these little ones and take the frequency as my own. And there was not enough sort of backlash.
Nobody wants to or can do anything about that. That sounds like something should be illegal about that, because like people will die, right?
No. Why? No.
Lack of alerts to incoming weather anomalies.
It's not going to stop the weather. It's not going to stop the weather satellites. They'll just piggyback on the signal.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of weird. It's how he's done it. But yeah, it's just
Elon Musk.
Yeah, he's a visionary in some ways, and he's the classic James Bond villain in others. So.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think it's great that humans are getting into space really, really cheaply. I wish someone had blown the dust off the covers of the Dragon, like the Sea Dragon proposal. I think that is a far cooler concept for a rocket. But
reusable rockets and delivery systems. You know, at the end of the day, it's all about efficiency and being cost effective. And so, if Musk can get this right to where they can efficiently do multiple launches and relaunches using, a set amount of rockets, then, the government or whichever agency that wants to use that service, they will pay top dollar. And not only that, if it's cost effective for him, there's one thing I'm curious about is maintenance on those rockets, how much it's going to cost him to do maintenance and repairs. I have a feeling that that's going to be like a very big expense.
Yeah, but if you corner a market from the very beginning of it, it won't matter how much you spent up front if you can afford to spend that much up front. It won't matter.
Yeah, because you dictate the price. And Scott Manley and another guy whose YouTube channel I think is the Everyday Astronaut have actually done a breakdown of the numbers on the cost to whatever thing that Musk's going, because currently he's 3D printing the engines as well. Amazingly, he's going the way of the Russians of setting, the Russians and Mr. Ford of Model T Ford fame, of literally setting up a production line to factory production line the rocket engines, and so the economies of scale drop again.
I think for the most part, he's going to dominate that market for quite some time until Boeing, for whatever reason, decides to actually truly invest in their rocket technology. Not that they're not, but when it comes to space exploration, I don't think they're putting in as much effort as it seems. I think Musk is, and sure, he's getting a lot of money from the federal government to do it. But
the bid to get on the moon, his bid is receiving the least amount of money.
Yeah, I mean,
by the time he gets to that point, he will have already flown Starship multiple times. So that's where he's saying, hey, look, that's why he threw the bid in. That's when it came up. He said, oh, look, by the time my competitors make their hardware from scratch, I'll already have put a ship around the moon and back. So, hey, I'll just modify one of them to land on the moon.
That being said, is anyone else concerned that Elon Musk might be willing to engage in cannibalism? He looks like a cannibal to me.
Okay.
I don't know.
I've
very
never
important
met
what he
anyone
looks
who
like.
survived an Andean plane crash, so I wouldn't know.
Remember
But I
days
mean,
when he was
if
bald
you
and
were-
humble.
Let's say that. Let's say that you were on a flight and it crashed in the Andes. Would you be comfortable if Elon Musk was on that flight with you?
Only if we
Isn't it-
both
isn't it-
survived.
Isn't it the case that he'd probably
If
be the
he's-
first one to suggest, "Hey, let's eat each other"?
Well, no, that's not what they did, though. They ate the dead people.
Right.
Yeah. So if he's dead and I'm alive,
They'll go
by
after him
default he's
first.
on the menu. If I'm
Right.
dead and he's alive, by default
won't care.
I'm on the menu.
Yeah,
If
but
we're both alive,
I'm not going to eat. Elon
everyone
Musk.
else is on the menu.
I won't eat Elon Musk because I don't eat cannibals. It's just a rule.
You gotta have standards, right?
Right. I draw the line. Generally, I eat herbivores. That's why I love beef.
Right?
Grass fed.
I've got a question. Has anybody considered yet the junk in space that all these
Yes.
satellites and stuff is causing?
Kessler syndrome.
How we're gonna? Okay.
There's no junk in space. There's no space.
There's a
Oh yeah.
no, well, yeah.
I just wondered if they've thought of any ways of collecting all this junk.
Yes, multiple ways.
Really?
Yeah, because the guy who it's named after, Kessler, he, before we were launching rockets, actually proposed that, hey, if we put enough stuff in space, it will turn into junk. And I can't remember when Kessler, who it's named after, proposed this. And so they actually now track the largest pieces of junk, and they actively move the International Space Station around to avoid getting hit by it.
Yeah.
The proposals for collecting it, as you say, is the brute force effect is you just throw a big metal plate into orbit and use it it survives the stuff that impacts it.
Okay.
Yep.
So like throwing a big magnet out there or what?
Well, not a big magnet, just like a big
Just something.
sheet of battleship armor.
It's the equivalent of that fat kid that you hand the sled to hold up as a shield during
Yeah.
a snowball fight. You just send him forward. You follow him like a linebacker while he takes the brunt of it, and then you lob snowballs above him. I love it. It's great.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing. If we took all of the plastic out of the oceans and just put that into space, would that get
good
people
idea.
thinking about all the plastic that we should probably not be putting out into space?
Well,
I'm just
there's-
wondering.
Well, no, see, now here's where physics gets really screwy. So it takes 9.8 meters per second to get into orbit, right? So once you're in orbit, you're halfway to anywhere else. Now, what you want to do is to take all your junk and drop it into the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's really hard to do.
So you're
Which
saying
everyone's-
actually, so getting it into space, not a problem. Getting it at the sun, that's difficult.
Yes, that's
Whoa,
why
whoa.
most of our probes go away from the sun. Or haven't you not noticed? Of all the probes we've gone to Pluto. We've gone to Jupiter.
I've
We've
only
gone
gone
to-
a few probes in my life, and I'm not comfortable talking about that.
Yes, but so to Venus, I think we've sent maybe 2 or 3. To Mercury, we've possibly sent 1.
I think that's
Um,
I've seen at least one.
Odeon was
Mm,
mentioning
one, two,
the satellite
one,
that's
two.
going to look at the sun. That satellite isn't leaving Earth orbit, I don't think. It's going
right.
to circle around the Earth.
yeah,
to
like
look at the
stereo
sun.
A and B.
Yeah, no. There
it's-
is a satellite going in. Yes, there is. Sorry,
Yeah.
yes. But again, that's one satellite going in. All the rest of them are going away.
Yeah.
And there's a physics reasons for that, and basically it's because the Earth orbits the sun. It takes 365 days for our ball of rock or silicate to go around the sun. That's momentum right there. And so to go into the sun, you have to cancel the Earth's momentum.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's a lot of it. That's a lot of energy.
But so, in other words, then what you're saying then, if we wanted to try to like develop a plan to like dispose of things by having the sun just burn that stuff up.
Yep.
That's actually going to be a really big lift. It actually is going to end up being cheaper, and I'm going to guess, because it's probably going to come from somebody like Elon Musk, cheaper and more affordable, more corporately likely, that we just dump that stuff into orbit.
Well, you can't dump it into orbit, because then when you launch more rockets, you'll run into it, because the orbit around the planet is a finite space.
Well, that's when they engage the whole fat kid with the shield.
Yeah, but
What do
then
you do with it
that's
after
still
that?
got to go somewhere. You can't just keep making a bigger and bigger ball of junk.
Not only that, keep in mind that anything that's moving at speeds in orbit, like if it hits you, even if it's a plastic bag, somehow, if that hits you, it can shred you. That small little bottle cap can, like, moving at certain speeds could tear through the space station.
So there's
I saw
pictures
Gravity
of...
with Sandra Bullock. Yeah, that stuff was devastating.
God, that was a terrible movie.
It was a
Yeah.
terrible movie.
Only
But
if
they
you
killed
understand
George
real
Clooney.
things. It
But
was
they
a
killed
great
George
movie if you
Clooney.
don't understand that stuff.
She threw George Clooney to die. That was hilarious.
I thought that was hilarious, because that I mean, I am not that strong in science, and I am by no means any kind of physics major or well versed in physics. When I saw that scene, I was like, wait, what? It actually defied the logics of physics the movie itself had established for the audience.
Yes, yes.
it was
Once he
ridiculous.
stops,
Yeah.
once he stops, she literally should have been able to pull him in. There was
Yeah.
nothing acting on him
but
anymore.
Yank him in. No, I'm not going to stop moving. You need to push me away more. Like, wait, what? That's not permanent. Like, what?
Yes. So here's so there's another concept in physics that was initially proposed by Russian physicists back in the 1800s, before they had their Cultural Revolution, of the elevator, the orbital elevator, the beanstalk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Arthur C. Clarke, who regrets not patenting the idea, said that if you put a satellite at, I think it's 36,000 kilometers up, it now at the equator, it now becomes geostationary. It will sit above that point of the Earth forever, barring perturbations in gravity and stuff, or being hit by something.
Right. Or what do they call that? A permanent change in the Earth's rotation, or
Well, no, the Earth rotates in 24 hours, and if your satellite is 36,000 kilometers up, its orbital speed is such that it will also orbit the Earth in 24 hours.
But what's the? I think it's actually called. I don't know if this is a technical term, but the wobble.
Yes, well, the Earth's got a wobble, and then the Moon's going to interact it, and the whole. So yeah, it'll need thrusters, but
Because the rate that the Earth spins doesn't change, but the tilt that it spins at may have changed at least once in the past.
Oh yeah, but that tilts so slow that your satellite's not going to feel it. But so you get the satellite into that geostationary orbit, and then from that satellite, like a tightrope walker. So the tightrope walker has the pole that they balance themselves with, yeah?
Sure.
And so you just, from that tightrope walking point, you just have a really, 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 really long pole. And eventually, one end of the pole touches the Earth, and the other end of the pole is now double 36 kilometers out. But the center of mass is still at that geostationary orbit. So now you have a pole from the Earth up to the geostationary point and beyond. And so
this
now,
would be by far the cheapest way to get things into outer space.
yes, the problem is the material to survive the stresses didn't exist until the Buckminster fullerenes were discovered.
The who to what?
So now, so you're familiar with the diamond, which is made of carbon. Which is
yes.
Okay, so that's one form of carbon. Then you have carbon that's graphite, which you make pencils out of, or slate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the diamond is a a crystal, whereas the slate is a flat sheet, like paper. So a Buckminster fullerene is not a sheet. It's not a crystal. It looks like a soccer ball. It's a cage of carbon. It's a ball, a sphere of carbon. Well, they've since found that you don't have to just make a ball or a sphere. You can make a tube. And that tube of carbon has the structural properties of diamond, which is many, 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 many times tougher than tungsten or iridium or any other metal. And so if we could make the beanstalk out of Buckminster fullerenes, Buckminster fullerenes are strong enough to be a structural material. We just can't make them at the moment any longer than like a nanometer, a millionth of a millimeter in length at the moment.
Isn't a Buckminster fullerene essential? Isn't that kind of the basis for graphene?
No, they use graphene to make the Buckminster fullerenes. They heat it up, they evaporate the graphite, and then as it condenses, this is from what I read in Ad of a New Scientist, as the vapor of the carbon condenses from the graphene, some of it forms into the shape of the balls and some of it forms into the shape of tubes. That was how they were originally making this stuff. Yeah.
Nothing went wrong. Keep going. Okay, guys. Nothing went wrong. Just keep going.
Okay, and so that's how the Buckminster fullerenes were first kind of discovered. People were mucking around with evaporating graphite and seeing what came out of it. Because originally they thought some of the properties of the Buckminster fullerenes, because sheets of graphite slide really, really, really well. And they were hoping that the Buckminster fullerenes would keep that slide, that almost frictionless property, and they were hoping that they would make a new super lubricant. Because one of the problems with lubrication is that the very friction that you're trying to alleviate with the lubricant goes into the lubricant itself and it evaporates. Well, the Buckminster fullerenes temperature resistance, had it had those properties, would have been resistant to the heating of the friction. But from what little I gather, that doesn't happen, and I don't know why. Because I'm not a physicist.
Okay.
Which we're digressing now from getting into space. Because some of what Richard's talking about involves the planets, I'm pretty sure. It's been a long time since I've actually heard Richard explain his thing that he's writing up. But exploding Jupiter was one of them. Or am I wrong with that?
I'm not sure. I haven't known Richard that long, and we've only had a couple of good conversations so far. So I can't speak for him on anything really.
He does.
It's very interesting, that's for sure. But
I do know that from what I understand from early on, he did give an explanation to MathPig once. They did a video where he was discussing what he thinks is his interpretation of the story of David and Goliath is actually a predictive tale based on the movements of planetary bodies. But you'd have to ask him for the details because that's about as far as I got. The rest of it got really confusing. I myself am not a big fan of astronomy, so.
I've got another question that's a little off topic, but maybe.
I don't think we have a topic.
Oh, well, space and such, and quantum woo-woo we could go to, but I don't know enough about it really. But I was also going to ask you about magnetism on Earth is supposed to reverse or something.
The poles.
The poles are supposed to reverse.
Heard that. Well,
do you know anything about it?
Well, the big ball of iron in the center of the planet, which is lubricated from the mantle of the planet by the magma between, it's kind of like a free-floating ball bearing in a soup, and so there's nothing physically. So it can kind of rotate separate to the solid crust on the outside, kind of independently. And so from what I gather, the magnetic pole has been moving forever.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
When we lost the Australian explorers to reach the South Pole, they were going for not the South Magnetic Pole, but the South Geographic Pole, because the magnetic poles shift quite a bit,
Yeah.
relatively. So yeah, because I'm pretty sure geologists and the people paleontologists that study dinosaurs, they take core samples back through bits of rock that haven't moved for a very, very long time, and then they can track the certain
Polarity of
crystals.
the.
Yeah, certain crystals keep a little magnet in them from when they were from magma to solid.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Makes
as
sense.
you go up that layer, those poles shift.
Okay, I've heard recently that our poles are supposed to flip,
Mm,
and we're past due for that to happen. But I
maybe.
don't know anything about it other than I was just told that it
Well,
was past time for that to happen, and I don't know enough about it. So.
Statistically, we're late for a dinosaur-killing asteroid as well.
Sure,
That-
sure.
Those sort of things are literally completely random. And hell, we've had 2 asteroids come in, one of which actually caused injuries in Russia when it exploded in the atmosphere.
I didn't
Like
know
the
that.
shockwave of it exploding, when that shockwave reached the ground, blew windows in on people,
wow.
unfortunately. Yeah, and that didn't hit the ground.
Yeah.
So
I've heard of them going through houses and stuff like that, but
they're really small ones.
gonna say,
Like by
yeah.
the time, but
that's small ones.
the air resistance on those is such that by the time they've hit the ground, and I think there's actually a recorded case of a person being killed by one of those.
Yeah.
there is a little bit of an issue. I mean, if you say that, hey, it turns out that we're a little bit late for a species destroying or life destroying meteorite event, like the dinosaurs experienced. Let's keep in mind that we were also a little bit late for the pandemic that we're currently in. So
No, the last
for
one we
any of-
had was 100 years ago.
right. So yeah, I mean, but we ran through like 4 or 5 trial runs before we got to COVID-19, and now it's starting to look like, for anybody on your death pool, if life-shattering meteorite event was on your calendar for December, you might be doing pretty good right about now. My guess is it's still going to be kaiju. I think kaiju will probably do. I mean, we already had murder hornets, even though they're not murderous and they're not. Well, they are hornets, but they're
You
not.
have murder hornets. We don't. We have lots of other poisonous things. No, you can keep those things. I'll quite happily run away from a funnel web.
Wait,
They don't
where
fly.
are you Australian or are you from New Zealand?
Oh no, I appreciate my Kiwi brethren, and they can come across the Tasman and sign the space on the document and become an extra state whenever they want. We can probably throw away Queensland when they want to do it.
Shit.
That'd be trading up. Oh shit! What?
No, okay. You answered my question automatically by prefacing all the things that you kind of excuse about the Kiwi. So
They are great people. They really are. They're fantastic. Worked with a few of them.
they
They've
don't
also
have,
got
but they
history
don't have funnel webs on their island, do they?
No, they have toratoras, and they have ground-dwelling parrots, and they have a cricket that you can wear as a hat.
Are you serious? That sounds
Yeah.
actually kind of
You've
whimsical.
never seen their hibernating cricket.
No.
Okay, have you seen the Jack Black King Kong movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the giant crickets in that movie,
Yeah.
that eat people, except for the jaws, they are physical representations of the weta.
Huh.
Hmm.
Well, I'll be damned. That doesn't seem that whimsical at all anymore.
Yes, they got a lot of inspiration from some of their fauna. Did you know that not only did
All you're doing is fulfilling a certain bias that I have, that New Zealand plus Australia are nightmare places filled with nightmare creatures that I would be better off avoiding because they're nightmare places.
That's why most of Australia is desert. We don't go there. We go off, play Mad Max. Bye bye. Yeah,
But I mean, is it pretty much the case that the only stuff that's safe is stuff that's more or less urbanized, right? Like if you're in Sydney,
no.
you're all right.
So I used to work in a factory further into the city. I live in Sydney, and I was wandering around the factory at night, and they had installed a brand new tiles in the foyer, so they're very bright and shiny and new. And I looked down and saw a small black spider. Oh, that's cute! A small black spider on the white tiles.
Now, hang on. I'm going to say something right now that I think maybe people aren't used to, but I'm not doing this to you. This isn't meant to be personal, but Australians tend to actually downplay a lot of what happens to them and a lot of what they mean in terms of like, size and danger and all that. So by
small as in like the head of a pin. No, or maybe a couple of bits bigger than the head of a pin. Okay.
I thought when you said small, it was a small spider by Australian standards, which means it was 12 inches or more.
I don't know. So microscopic by the Australian standards.
Okay, right. Yeah, that's flea
so
standard.
I bend down to look at this tiny little spider trapped in this huge ocean of white. This tiny little spider, instead of running away, you could see the legs as it spun at me, and it jumped at me.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, that's a little baby funnel web. Walk away, because they're aggressive at any size.
So, did you do the responsible thing and burn the building down, or what?
Why? If that's the baby, I'd only piss off the mother. No.
And the mother is what, the size of an old-fashioned Chrysler? I mean, I
don't know. They'll sit on you. They're like the Americans have tarantulas, sort of thing, the big ones.
Yeah, but you know what? Tarantulas actually have this weird class because there's urticating and non-urticating tarantulas in the spider kingdom, and I'm not exactly sure which ones are considered quote-unquote true spiders or not. But it's weird. Urticating spiders are the ones that have the fuzzy legs. And they just scrape those legs back and forth to pump out the fibers that they grow off their legs. They're like fiberglass, and they shake those things off to get them out in the leg, and they try to respirate them out because they irritate the respiratory passageways of any potential predator or threat to them. I always think it's kind of weird. That's actually one of the worst things that kind of a North American or even Central American tarantula can do to a person. They're not really all that venomous. I mean, if they bite you, you're going to get very sick. It's it's going to suck, but they're not necessarily lethal. But it's not like Australian spiders where it's like, okay, like in comparison, it's like, oh, these are Spider-Man villains, and Australia, those are like Superman villains or Batman villains. Like they're just overpowered.
Female funnel webs the fangs of them will punch through sand shoes. There's been documented cases of that.
Sand shoes?
Sneakers.
Okay, so if you're wearing like canvas shoes or something soft, they can go right through that.
The big females, yeah.
Well, it looks like it. I mean, Richard's showing some pictures here. I think he's showing these, and it's got it. The face is just 2 teeth. That's
the fangs.
Yeah,
we are going to punch these into you, inject the venom and the digestive juices, and then we're going to suck everything up.
But here's the thing. I mean, for people that are looking at this, observe that spider's face. If you were to make a human face equivalent to what this spider's got going on, you would have to make a human face that was 4/5 teeth.
Yeah.
That's essentially what's going on with that brutal beast. Jesus Christ, it's made of evil. I don't know if anybody's ever seen Alien, but it was actually, that's a lullaby compared to what that thing looks like. Holy Christ.
Okay. Richard, do you want to pull up Australian bull ant? Okay. Those funnel webs are solitary, yeah? They live alone. You can see why.
Yeah, because Richard, they're made out of evil. Nothing should live with them. They scare
no. Bring up Australian bull ant. Okay, these things are so old and primitive that they look at wasps as their great granddaughters.
Holy Christ, these things look like they're still in, oh my God, they're still in beta phase.
These things are the grandparents of hornets. Hornets went, fuck living with this. We're growing wings and flying away.
Ooh.
Okay. Now, do you want to know the funny thing is? Funnel webs live alone. That's an ant. What do ants live in?
Yeah.
Colonies.
So
My brother pricked one up once.
So you guys also have these things. Now, here's the thing. I know about threats in terms of like funnel webs and the brown king and
The brown
all-
snake.
all the fucking sharks. The taipan, which the taipan's really not a threat unless you are in Darwin on a
Brown
nature
snakes
bike.
suck. We
Brown
avoid
snakes.
brown snakes in summer.
Saltwater crocodiles, which are
Oh no, they're using tourists to teach the saltwater crocodiles to jump out of the water.
Oh, that's so smart.
And the thing is, the saltwater crocodiles, they migrate between the northern bit of Australia and Papua New Guinea. They will cross that bit of ocean and back.
wait, what? No, are you fucking with us right now?
No,
They're crossing ocean.
Yep.
How are they doing that?
because they're big.
Okay, so they are now navigating between two.
No, they
land
have
masses.
always been. It's just only Australia really reports losing people to them.
Oh
The
my
Papua New Guineans are probably much smarter than our tourists.
Well, I don't. Well, they were cannibals. Getting back into cannibalism. Let's think about this for a second. So you got massive, primitive, man-eating lizards that can go from northern Australia to another.
Oh, so for a second there, I thought you were talking about the goannas.
Well, the
See, the
goannas.
crocodiles. No, the crocodiles only live on the northern part of the continent, up in Darwin and that sort of thing. The rest of the continent has goannas, and they climb trees.
Are they dangerous?
Well, sorry, they're smaller than crocodiles. They're about 3 to 4 feet long, like nose to tail.
So it's like it's like running into like a possum or something.
Yeah. Oh, and then we have blue tongues. So they've been known to give you painful bites. They're actually kind of cute to look at, though. They're really stumpy. They've got a big head and a big tail. They kind of use their tail as a lure, so that when birds like crows and that and magpies try and eat them, they've got a 50-50 chance of attacking the tail and not the head. But yeah, they'll blue tongues are known to rear up and threaten people, and kids get bitten by them.
Is that a skink?
A skink on steroids, yeah.
Okay. Holy shit!
And
I just looked it up. It's like a dragon without wings.
Yep. But they're really cute. They've got really stumpy legs. They're really cute.
What is wrong with that country? So what is the prevalence of the problem with paralysis ticks? Because this is something that a lot of people do not know.
Oh, I don't know, but there's also a new thing that's popped up in the last 20 or 30 years where, so basically people can be latched onto by ticks, and then the ticks insert an enzyme as they feed, and now you become allergic to red meat, and you go into anaphylactic shock.
Yes, we've actually got that in the United States. That's actually appeared here.
Really?
Yeah, that's popped up in the last 20, 30 years here. One of our governor generals has developed that, and they're pretty sure he was bitten by. He remembers. Oh yeah, they took a tick off him, and then he was at a Christmas party, and they had the great steaks, and he's chowed into this steak, and anaphylactic shock. If they hadn't had an EpiPen, he would have been dead.
That's amazing, because that's slightly different than the one I heard about it. Because I thought that I knew a person that had a weird genetic anomaly where if they ate anything that contained a high amount of taurine, like red meat, they would pass out. It wasn't anaphylaxis.
No, this I'm pretty sure it's. I may be remembering the story wrong, but it's
No.
it's a thing, and it's spreading.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think it does. I think it does spur on anaphylaxis when exposed to when someone ingests red meat. But I thought it was weird because I thought the one in the United States was one that mimicked a genetic ailment that would, if you ate red meat, rather than slipping into anaphylaxis, you would go into it's some kind of taurine, an inability to process the amino acid taurine from an ingested source, and it would cause you to slip into a coma.
Oh wow.
It's really weird. There is a genetic ailment that is like that. It was in an episode of House. I knew I had a classmate that actually had that.
Oh wow.
It was really strange. If she ate any red meat, it would cause her to just her just vitals would drop. Normally she'd be fine, but if she were to eat like an entire steak or something like that, she would be hospitalized for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Going back to the bull ant, I had one in my house once, and
you had a goanna in your house?
No, the bull ant. We had a bull ant in the kitchen, and after we stomped on it a few times, it still wasn't dead.
How big are they?
Oh gosh. Take your pinky finger and go from like your fingernail back to your second joint.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Nope.
Are these things poisonous? I mean, I shouldn't say
no, they're not poisonous. But so the full-grown ants are vegetarian, right? What they do is they use those honking big pincers to grab onto anything, and then the stinger on their back end to sting it to death. That they then drag back to the nest, back down into the nest, so that the grubs, who are carnivorous, can eat it.
Okay, so basically these are ants if ants needed to exist in Mordor.
Well, they're ants that said, you know what, we're just not going to bother becoming murder hornets. We don't need to. We're going to leave that for the less adapted ants. I think there's also a jumping jack ant. I think that's actually New Zealand. So that's kind of like halfway, like a bit bigger than a Brazilian ant, like the little brown sort of normal ant that everyone's used to. But it's got really good the bull ant's got really good eyesight too, for something so small. Like, you know, you can be a good distance away, and they will see you, and the guards will turn at you, sort of thing. But no, the New Zealanders have an ant that will jump at you. So they're doing good.
Here's a question for you that you would know. What happened in 1932
Where?
in Australia?
Not off the top of my head, 1932.
Oh.
I'm not that old.
The Great Emu War.
I've heard reference to that, but I've not actually looked that up yet.
Oh,
So
okay. Look it up sometime. It's kind of interesting. Okay. I got an IOS friend that told me about it and told me to look it up. It's kind of, the thing is, how would you kill those suckers? You
Which one?
Shoot a couple, the emus.
You leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. Emus are really so you're thinking about something that has the brain the size of a walnut that can look you in the eye.
Yeah. I don't think
they're pacifistic. They're herbivores. They're like kangaroos, which are like 6 foot tall rabbits.
Yeah, they're more of an annoyance, I think. And
if you got near a nest, I reckon the male would put a foot through you.
Yeah.
There was a story I heard about. I think this was back in the 90s, where a teenager was at a zoo or some kind of like, enclosure or whatever, and he was harassing a cassowary bird. And cassowaries.
Oh fuck no! Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's what we were talking about the other day.
So cassowaries are up in New Guinea, but we have something in Queensland. So think of an emu with American linebacker helmet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And essentially, what it was, I mean, I'm not sure if it was a cassowary. Maybe it was a different species, but
no, that's a cassowary. You've got cassowary, ostriches, and emus.
Yeah, essentially, it's like an ostrich or an emu, but it's like that. If you velociraptored it up a little bit, you just give that some steroids, you give it some bladed feet. Well, this kid, he was a 17-year-old kid, and I can't remember what part of Australia this was in, but I think this happened in the mid to late 90s. He was harassing this particular bird. It jumped the fence, landed on him, and during its tantrum, sliced his fucking neck open with its back claws, nearly decapitating him. The only reason it didn't decapitate him is because his head was still attached to his torso because it had not completely separated the spinal column.
Yeah, they've got
open everything else.
Yeah, no. So the cassowaries live mainly up in tropical, dense jungle, and so the big crest on their head, they literally use that to battering ram their way through the jungle. So you have something the size of an emu that just puts its head down, and with this giant ice-breaking snowplow, just wants to run through the jungle.
So,
Don't know why.
okay, so we have a killer killer ostrich. We've covered the fact that ants are more satanic in Australia. Everything is getting worse in Australia. However, there is an interesting thing about Australia that I thought it was fascinating: is spinifex.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say they're all descendants of criminals, but
I don't know if anybody's actually.
Yeah,
Spinifex is a
political. It was all political.
Spinifex was?
No. The reason the Brits threw people here is they wanted to get rid of the political troublemakers. That's why a lot of them were Irish, that sort of thing.
It's the interesting thing to me is that Australia, if you look at all the stuff that's around it, it's more lethal than like what would happen to you if you ended up in a particularly dark episode of Black Mirror. Just look at your watch, give it 15 minutes, and you are doomed. But spinifex is a grass that if you fall on it, it will slice you to ribbons. It can cut bone. It's essentially the same consistency as fiberglass. Now, fortunately, it doesn't grow anywhere except in like the outback. So you have to actually get out there in order to get into any of it and get into any trouble. But
I'd probably have to drive a good hour to get out to that.
What's up?
I'd probably have to drive a good hour west to get out to anywhere like that.
Okay, that's not far enough of a drive for me.
I can drive an hour south.
Yeah.
Sorry. I can drive 2 hours south and I can be in Canberra.
Yeah, nobody wants to be there, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, that's where we're putting all our politicians and we're trying to get Trump to build a wall around it.
That's the one place, like, if you go to Canberra, you die of boredom. If you go anywhere else in Australia, it's the venom that kills you.
Yeah.
But when I heard about that, I was like, holy shit. So you got paralysis ticks, you got great white sharks, you got,
crocodiles.
Goannas.
Goblin fish, some kind of weird ass
stonefish.
What's up?
Stonefish, fish that look like stone, and then they have spines down their back, or obviously part of the vertebrae that they for whatever reason they just sit there looking like a stone, except they have these spines pointing straight up, and you put your foot on them thinking they're a rock, and the spines are poisonous. So yeah, stonefish.
And they
blue
tend
ring
to cover
octopus.
themselves in bottom sand, so they blend in really well.
Yep, that's blue ringed octopus, which look really, really cute and really, really pretty.
Oh yeah, those things. Well, then you guys have like the world's most painful attacking animal, the box jellyfish.
Oh, funny story. So, there's a really good scientist. His specialty is in ancient crocodiles. That's where he got his bachelor's. And he's got a really engaging personality, and so he was the talking head in one of our science programs. He's about 6'1", so he's a big fella. And so he's doing a documentary on the Australian jellyfish, and he's talking to the world's leading expert on box jellyfish, who's about 5'0". And so the pair of them, the things the pants they wear when they go trout fishing?
Yes.
Okay, so they're both wearing those pants, and they're both up north where the beach water is quite calm, and they're both walking along in those wader pants. So the water is maybe half a handspan lower than the top of those pants. Mm. And the expert is explaining to Richard about the box jellyfish and blah, 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 blah. And it's on camera, which is awesome. And I've heard Richard explain this story from his position standing in those pants, of the gentleman reaches into the ocean and picks a box jellyfish up by the bell and goes, "Here's one, Richard," and waves it in his face.
What?
Yep. I've actually seen the footage. You can see, I can't remember Richard's last name off the top of my head, but his eyes just bug right out of his head. and it's not a piece of plastic floating on it. The expert has picked up a box jellyfish by the bell and gone, ta-da! Here's a box jellyfish.
First of all, how do you pick it up by the bell? Was it a big one or just a tiny one?
No, they're tiny. No, they're tiny. They're really, really tiny critters. Like at some points in their life. Well, the bell's not the point. The dangerous bit is the stingers off the back.
Yeah, that's the.
So you pick it up by the jelly, the bell, which is just jelly.
Yeah, and that from what I understand does not have any venom on it.
No,
toxin.
no.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the scary thing about box jellyfish?
The fact that you can actually scream after you've passed out.
No. So the scary thing I found out from listening to this expert is, so most jellyfish you think of are these round, pulsating masses of jelly, and which is pulsed by a muscle. Yeah. Box jellyfish are named because they're a box-like shape. But so think of a box with one end is open at, we'll call it the back, and that's where the tentacles trail away from, and it's the pulsing of that box that moves the jellyfish through the water away from the open end. So the open end is the back, the not open end is the front.
Mm-hmm.
So at the front where you have the four corners of the box, they have eyes.
Oh, interesting.
They have really primitive lens eyes on those four corners.
Which
There's
means
no
that
neural system connected to them, but they do know that box jellyfish will hunt towards shadow. They don't know how.
So they can target things. Good to know.
Yep.
I've got an interesting story about this. I picked this up from a book I read years ago. There was one that was actually kept in captivity somewhere in Australia, and it was a large one. It was quite a bit old. And the marine biologist that kept it in captivity, was essentially told the author of the book that I read, he was like, yeah, if you were to smash that cage and fill this entire room, this was a large room in an aquarium kind of observatory thing. There's about 14, 15 guests in there. Like, if you were to fill this entire room up with water, smash that cage and let this thing out, most of us would be dead in minutes.
Because the
tendrils are going to get to us, and they're going to, and the tendrils tend to drift towards, warm-bodied things.
Yeah.
Well,
what do you mean tend to drift toward warm-bodied things? What do you mean by that?
That for whatever reason, it's more like, it's not so much.
I'd say that
it might be more like an enzyme, so it sort of drifts towards other living things that have like a heat differential other than the water around it. So the tendrils sort of drift off towards that, touch it, zap it, and zap it is a crude thing. It's actually more like, imagine being executed by having your soul, by having a giant stuff out his cigar on your brain. That's essentially, from what I understand, is the only thing that comes close to describing the intense pain that anything feels when one of these tendrils hits you. One guy was swimming around with these damn things, and he was wearing a wetsuit it's specifically made so that you can get into the tendrils and you won't get any of this stuff on you. There was a gap between the wrist, the sleeve, and the wrist of the barrier of the glove, where he didn't have it sealed. And the tip of one of the tendrils, while he was swimming past to go back up to the boat, skimmed, just grazed that part of his wrist. He said, and I quote, "It was like someone was putting out a lit cigar on his wrist bone, right on that part of his wrist, for 2 weeks." The pain just didn't stop. It was just,
that made him a pleasant person.
Yeah. So it turns out that when they do this stuff in parts of Australia, they will close the beaches because they have like either Portuguese man o' war. It's that season.
Oh, they're fun.
They sting the shit out of people. But then they have box jellyfish season. And when those ones happen, that's when they're like, really, no, seriously, do not go out into the water. Well, one year, and this was in the mid-90s, one Australian kid who was particularly, I think he actually was from New Zealand. He was a tourist. He saw the signs. He was quite drunk. He was with friends and didn't care. Jumps into the water, starts swimming around. Well, there's box jellyfish all over the place. But he comes popping out of the water, screaming his head off because he's getting stung all over because he's gotten tangled up in one or more of them, the tendrils and stuff. And he comes out of the water, and they were actually surprised that he made it back up to the beach. His friends are waiting.
He's a Kiwi.
What's that?
Okay, so historically, in the First World War, when our guys were off doing it for King and Country, and everyone would charge the machine guns with their trusty sticks, the Kiwis, it's recorded, the Kiwis have actually the longest sustained charge against emplaced machine guns, as in they almost made it unaided to the other guys.
Well, that must have been it, because this kid managed to make it back up onto the beach, and they already could see welts on his skin. Like his skin was already reacting from being stung by this. They get a paramedic. Paramedic shows up. They're like watching for this. They knew, they knew people were fucking around, and I guess somebody had actually seen this kid go out into the water, and they're like, yeah, get medical help because he's going to need it. This kid, medical help shows up, and they're administering sedatives to him, and he's screaming after he lost consciousness.
Yeah. So in the tendrils, they have microscopic little cells that have tiny little harpoons that actually have the venom in the harpoons. So the tendril touches your skin, and then there's a contraction, and it fires this little harpoon into your skin that then injects the venom. That's how they work. There's a specific word for that. All jellyfish have them, and it starts with an N. Nemesis or something like that. And all jellyfish have them. It's just that the venom in the box jellyfish, it's specifically wired into the human nervous system to just turn on all the pain receptors in that area. It just turns them on. All of them. For a long time.
That story actually stuck with me. By the time when I was staying in Japan, there was one moment where somebody served up some kind of local jellyfish dish, and I was just like, yeah, I'd rather not. Like, couldn't do it. I was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm a little terrified. I ate most of the other,
That they eat poisonous pufferfish, goofy or whatever it is.
I ate it. I ate it multiple times. It's not good.
It's not good.
It's actually kind of weird. Somebody asked me about it, and they're like, "Well, did you ever have that poisonous pufferfish they had in Japan?" I was like, "Yeah, actually, I did." Because where I stayed at in Japan the last time I was there for about 6 months. It's the pufferfish capital of Japan, and so during particular holiday seasons and stuff, it would be pretty common for people to go out and get an entire tray of pufferfish sashimi just to exchange as a gift. So once that was exchanged, if you happened to be at a holiday party or a birthday party or something like that, once that tray got broken into, you needed to partake in that. Otherwise, you were that rude guest. And, being a foreigner, I'm automatically, quote unquote, that rude guest just because I look weird and I'm making people uncomfortable. So better not make it worse and not eat the fugu. So I've had fugu many times. It tastes like shit. It's not good sashimi. Like tuna, salmon, hell, even horse sashimi is infinitely better than fugu. Whale is better than fugu.
I've had horse. Horse was delicious. Maybe it's the way the mom canned it. I'm not sure.
Horse is fantastic. It was one of the weirdest foods that I'd ever had in Japan, and it was the most surprising. When I saw it, they brought it out. It was thinly sliced. It was raw. And I was like, I didn't think the first time I would ever have horse, it would be, I would be eating it in raw slices. It's fantastic.
I think it's better than beef. It's less gamey. That gamey taste of wild animal that's somewhat in beef. Horse, not so much.
Yeah, and it's weird. I don't know how Japan gets their particular horse, but it's like almost evenly marbled. It has this weird kind of zigzag pattern. It's almost equal. It's there's a little bit of fat in it, but it's a really lean meat. And usually in Japan, the really lean meat is actually kind of a cheaper meat. Normally they want something that has a good mouthfeel to it, so it's got a good balance of fat to protein. So they'll go for something more closer to like a ribeye or something like that. But with horse, I'd never had it in like central or northern Japan, but only in the south. But it was good. It was really tasty.
My horse died of an accident, so we ate really well that winter.
Really?
No joke. We ate my horse, yeah.
Oh, okay. I've heard, aren't there health issues associated with eating horse meat?
I don't know. Mom cooked it.
Well,
I thought there was something about like I don't know if it's prions or what it is, but I thought there were health concerns about it. But I know it's not like super common. It's not like
That's when you eat brains, like cow brains and monkey brains.
mad cow. Yeah, they found that prions can actually reproduce themselves.
Yep.
So the little proteins that float around inside wherever they float around inside the brain, they latch onto other proteins chains and they origami the other protein chains into copies of themselves to make more prion proteins.
Are you talking? You're talking about
Prion
prion disease, right?
Yeah, but the prions, the little protein chain that is the prion, it makes more copies of itself somehow.
Hang on, I gotta correct somebody in the comments. Somebody agnostic pagan mother. They feed it to school kids. No, actually, in Japan, generally horse is kind of a weird delicacy. It's not common. What they were feeding to kids in Japan that was really controversial. They were feeding them dolphin meat. And they were actually feeding. That was only happening in one particular prefecture that got its kind of supported its economy with a semi-annual dolphin butchery shenanigan that happened.
It still does, yeah. In inverted commas, cultural thing, but they can actually trace it back to, I think, around the Second World War or something like that. So it's potentially something that started when the Second World War was happening. It's talking completely out my ass and maybe completely wrong, but it's something that they can trace back to a definite point in time that's not centuries old.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. It's just I'm pretty sure it's the same as their whole, we're going to scientifically study whales by shooting harpoons into them.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
wait a minute.
The country ran into problems because they were feeding the local population. That particular prefecture was feeding the local population dolphin meat, and then was ignoring the fact that they were having issues with mercury toxicity, which is something that had actually happened, I think, 50 or 60 years before, with a company that had poisoned a prefecture nearby with the same kind of thing. And so it was.
Wait, are you saying that the dolphins naturally collect inordinate amounts?
Well, no, that's the way food chains work. So there's actually a very influential book back in the 60s of the Summer with No Bird song, and the female, the woman ornithologist who printed it, it's what led to the final acknowledgement that DDT is such a bad thing. So DDT is really good at killing mosquitoes, but doesn't kill all mosquitoes. So the mosquitoes that doesn't kill have a really, really small trace of DDT in them. So the birds come along and the birds eat a lot of mosquitoes. And so now the birds have a higher concentration of DDT in them.
Than the insect did.
Yeah, because they eat a lot of the insects. And so now you've got a higher concentration of DDT in the bird.
Right.
And that was in birds. In birds,
porpoises versus other predatory fish eating.
So really, really small. Well, plankton potentially can pick up particles of mercury. So then, a really small fish eats a lot of plankton and builds up mercury. Then a bigger fish eats a lot of those smaller fish.
Right.
Until eventually you get a fish that's big enough that a dolphin's going to eat.
Right.
It's usually
a dolphin eats a lot of fish.
Sure.
Like, generally speaking, like your species of tuna, if you're going for if you want to try to reduce the amount of mercury you're going to get in your diet, you don't want to eat albacore tuna, because typically when those particular tuna are caught, they're caught when they're larger, and the bigger the fish, the more mercury is built up in their body. So generally, if you go for skipjack tuna, which is usually caught when they're relatively young and relatively small, the less exposure they've had to that mercury, the lower the levels. Still not great, but dolphins especially, and part of it is also because of their composition of the fat in their body, I think makes it worse. When ingesting them, they're not a good source of food in general, but on top of it, they are uniquely predisposed to storing lots of mercury in their tissue, which makes them even worse for human consumption. And yet this particular prefecture in Japan was insisting that this was a culturally appropriate thing and that they should do it.
Even that's the part I was trying to figure out is why would it be in greater levels in a porpoise that ate fish rather than, say, a baleen whale that ate small thing plankton and just buttloads of it?
Because the way the how to say it, the way the concentration builds up, it's not just the single meal, it's over a long time as well.
Sure. Okay. Of course.
Because so say a baleen whale takes in a ton of plankton.
Okay.
So not all that plankton is going to be broken down in the whale's stomach. Some of it's going to be pooped out. So the mercury is going to pass through the whale. Yeah. Whereas, I'm trying to. Economy of scale is the only term I can kind of think of.
Well, I think it's actually it's interesting to think about, because I remember, I think the Monterey Aquarium in the U.S. actually kind of broke this down, because even for krill, plankton eating fish, even though krill and plankton might get exposed to mercury a certain amount, even though a krill eating animal is going to consume just an enormous amount of that krill, the amount of mercury it's going to get in its system proportionally is going to pale in comparison to another fish-eating animal. And so if you've got something like a porpoise or a dolphin that typically preys on smaller fish, those, for whatever reason, that is what's building up mercury in its system, in its particular food chain. The krill doesn't seem to be as bad as consuming animals up the food chain.
It may just have to do with how the mercury lodges in the organs of the things that it goes from one to the other, if you know the way the biology works.
For whatever reason, whatever was happening to some of the kids that were being exposed to this food, part of the problem was that they would be given cuts of, and I know this because where I was staying in southern Japan, they would serve what's called whale bacon. It was sperm whale. It was sashimi, and it was basically whale blubber with a thin strip of meat. And I tried it. Also, not particularly delicious. That was essentially more or less what they were giving to school kids in this particular prefecture. That's based on this documentary, the Dolphin Cove one that Agnostic Pagan Mother posted. If they're being fed the fatty tissue of the dolphin, that's where actually a lot of the mercury is kind of suspended. So they were getting kind of like the strongest dosage of it. It wasn't as bad as the mercury outbreak that they had, I think, 150 years before this, but it was pretty bad. And it's weird because the outcry for it, at least internally, was weird, because that documentary came out. There was outcry there was sort of a pushback from Japanese people culturally, like they didn't want outside countries telling them what they could and couldn't do in terms of like these kinds of like harvests of animals and this kind of stuff. For them, it was just a natural hunt kind of thing. But internally, people were like, yeah, you don't want to feed your kids this stuff because you're gonna poison them with mercury. So it was really weird. It was kind of all over the place.
Whoops. So, Richard, could you give a précis of your idea?
A what?
So I can pick a short summary.
Oh.
Of your idea, so I can pick it up again, because I've kind of lost what it was.
Okay, so I received a reading frame for spiritual stories in 2012. I was an anti-theist. I didn't in any way want something like that to be true. In fact, I was pretty happy without any such thing. And the reading frame applies very, very broad spectrum. In fact, I don't find an ancient religion that you would classically think of as a religious expression where it doesn't work. And what it describes is absolutely no defeat of physics or magic, but only that some Darwinistic-like evolutionary process happened somewhere else in the universe. And although we see samplings of plants and animals taken from that process here, this planet was terraformed, and using those creatures set up this way on purpose to support us for a time until such that our extremely advanced, what we would call technologically advanced ancestry arrive en masse, and just we're just scared as hell for a time, but then over the course of a couple months into about 3.5 years, we understand what's going on, and we're cool with it, and we leave with them. And then they melt the planet and extract resources.
Okay.
It's basically
So
it.
how does paleontology fit into that? Like the study of
Quite well.
dinosaurs?
Quite well. No problem.
Okay. So the terraforming then happened over the lifetime of the planet then.
Yeah, how old the planet is, I don't see any real number put on that. Besides, in terraforming, dating the rock is purposeless.
What?
It doesn't tell you anything about when the terraforming began or whatever.
Huh?
Only finding out the age of bones and animals and stuff like that would,
Well-
other than the effect they had on the planet. I guess you could figure out some of
Well,
that.
there's no gaps. Oh, I'm not going to say. I have no idea what I'm really talking about, so I'm not going to say that. So as I said, there's a book you really should read called Strata by the late Sir Terry Pratchett. You'll love it
Okay.
because it deals with. It starts off with a manager
Mhm.
calling 2 engineers into her office so that she can give them a stern warning of not to put anti-nuclear placards into the skeletal hands of dinosaurs' bones before they bury them.
I'm sorry, I don't get what's going on there.
She is a manager of a company that is building, not terraforming, building from the core outwards a planet.
Okay.
And that's what her company does, because humanity has found that when it moves to a planet that does not have a deep history, all of the humans go mad. So if the humans try and settle on the moon, which doesn't have an active geological history, after a certain amount of time, all the humans go mad. And so they have to terraform dead worlds to give them a history.
Okay.
And they have machines that are powerful enough that they can lay down mile-high layers of strata into which they hide the bones of dinosaurs and stuff to give the planet a deep history.
Okay.
And then the humans that come in to settle later don't go mad.
Right.
So the crux of the story is they eventually find she gets contacted by alien. Oh, so there are 2 other alien races that are alongside the humans. One of which I remember their name is the Kung, and they are 4-armed frogs. And then there's another race that are half a
their
ton.
4 arms are like frogs? Is that what you just said?
They're amphibians. They have 2 legs and 4 arms.
Okay.
So they're it's 4-armed frogs is the quick way to Pratchett describes them. Then the other alien race is like a ton of anthropomorphized saber-toothed tiger.
Okay.
So the humanity shares the stars with these 2 other alien races.
Mm-hmm.
They come across a hidden secret, and then the story unfolds from there as they unravel this hidden secret.
Okay.
But it's you have the heroine and her 2 alien sidekicks, one of which is a Kung, a 4-armed alien frog, and the other one is the saber-toothed tiger.
Okay.
Person.
Yes.
Strata, you'll love it.
I won't.
You will.
No, I won't, because I'm never going to read it. I mean, not while I'm on this planet. I'm just too busy to read science fiction stuff.
But Pratchett's stories are fantastic.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm not putting down the author.
They're really, really good. And this was his second book after The Dark Side of the Sun. Because the first science fiction book he wrote was literally people landing on the dark side of the sun. Haven't actually read it, so I don't know anything about it.
I would be interested in understanding better why you would recommend that book to me.
Because you're talking about terraforming, and terraforming is a crux of Terry Pratchett's Strata. It's fundamental to the concept of the book, if you know what I mean.
Oh, okay, cool.
So he kind of goes into the physics of the machines you need to build a planet. Even though I think he wrote it back in the 70s, maybe the 80s. It was before he did all of his Discworld stuff, his fantasy stuff. Because Pratchett only did 2 science fiction books, Dark Side of the Sun and Strata. All the rest of his books, of which there's maybe 14 or possibly even 20 of, they're all fantasy, based on the Discworld.
Okay.
One
of the things that I think that religious people, especially American Christians, I know that for sure, neglect from the text is the cyclical nature of what's being described. That it's describing several occasions of intelligent beings doing the same thing in different locations. So I think a fundamental part of understanding this is that the word earth should not be a proper noun. It should be lowercase, like oak, because it's a type of a thing. It's not the only one of them. What's that?
No, I get now what you're saying. Yeah, but technically, it is only one of a thing.
From our perspective, yeah.
No, the Earth is unique, literally. It's like a fingerprint.
Of course. I mean, you're unique from me, but Venus. We're both humans.
Yeah, but we both have different fingerprints.
Sure, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. They don't need to be exactly the same. I don't see any reason to do that.
Yeah, but so the closest planet we have to Earth in our solar system is Venus, and it's really screwed up.
Yeah, we're not living there anytime soon, as far as I can tell.
You can. They're again Russian physicists. So the clouds around Venus, sulfuric acid. Teflon is immune to sulfuric acid, so you can build a big balloon of Teflon, fill it full of air, and it will float like a helium balloon will float in Earth's atmosphere at a survivable altitude in the clouds of Venus.
Cool.
Yep.
Kind of tough to get supplies in and out, but other than that,
there's some really good
biodome there.
Yeah, that's one of the if we want to colonize anywhere, Venus is it, because its gravity is the same as Earth's.
Yeah,
and
see,
its
the
spin
only problem,
sucks.
See, the only thing Venus is really kind of missing is a good size moon.
You can get away without a moon. The bad thing it has is that it's currently rotating backwards compared to every other planet in the solar system.
What do you mean by rotating backwards? You mean spinning the wrong way?
Yep.
Oh boy.
So the Earth, so the Earth rotates east to west, or whatever you call it, right? Mars, it may spin slower, it may spin faster. It spins the same way. In looking down, they both spin the same way. Jupiter, the next planet out, it spins the same way. Saturn, the next planet out, it spins the same way. Is Uranus next?
Neptune, Uranus.
Uranus. It's if it's Neptune next, then it spins the same way. If Uranus is the next one out, even though it's tilted over effectively 90 degrees to all the other planets, if you stood it back up again, it would spin the same way.
The right way. Yeah.
The only other planet that doesn't quite spin at all is Mercury, because it's tidally locked to the sun.
Yeah, so its day is longer than its year. Yeah.
Yeah, but it still kind of spins.
It does spin, yeah.
Whereas Venus, compared to all the other planets, goes the opposite way.
Right. There's also 6 moons that rotate around planets the wrong direction. "Quote unquote."
Well, yeah, but they may be captured They may be captured Oort cloud bodies or things like that. Because there's definitely 1 or 2 moons on the outer Uranus that they're pretty sure that's what happened to. That's why they're there. Actually, the 2 moons of Mars are probably that sort of body, since they're such tiny little pebbles.
So I want to address something that Christopher Hitchens said as an objection, and I think it's a decent objection. Why would God take blah, blah, blah long, 4.2 million years or 4.2 billion years or whatever, to take through the evolutionary process to get to where we are now, just so that 144,000 Jews could make it to heaven? And I think that's a reasonable argument. And he threw a couple different Christian ideas and some Jewish ideas in there together, and that's fine. I don't have a big problem with it. But if what's going on is, say, a new Earth begins terraforming every 1,000 years, something like that, and then an end times, or the great day of the Lord, or rapture, or whatever you want to call it, all that stuff happens about also every 1,000 years somewhere in the universe, then there's actually no time stall going on there. And I think that's a major part of what I believe is true in the text.
Sorry, say that again?
That if, let's say it takes, just for easy math, because I'm bad at math, let's say it took 10,000 years to terraform a planet, okay? And each step of the process were 1,000 years, and there's 10 steps, right? To get to what we experience right here. But there's one started every 1,000 years, and there's 10 of them. At all times, there's 10 Earths somewhere in the universe. Then there is no actual like wasted time delay waiting for an Earth to be completed.
So what happens to the old ones? Sorry.
Well, according to the story, as best I can tell, all the usable resources, including whatever stars generate and happens to be here by accident, that wasn't put here in the first place purposefully, gets taken and claimed.
And
such as the atmosphere, all of the oceans, 7 mountains of metal.
Okay, so for some reason the old ones get torn down.
Yeah, left waste.
Okay.
Return to their original, pretty much their original condition.
And this is happening as we speak?
Sure.
Why don't we see it?
What do you mean, why don't we see it?
Okay. So astronomers, and I can't remember how far away. Oh, sorry. This is happening in galaxies, not our galaxy.
I said in the universe somewhere.
Yes, so it's happening in other galaxies then.
Yeah, it could be. It could be even in our own galaxy, but perhaps there's too much crap in the way between us and them. We can't see them doing it.
I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah, there's. I'm pretty sure we can see a decent way across our disk. We can actually see the black hole that's at the center of our disk. We don't have a good line of sight on it because, as you say, there's a lot of dust between us and it. But we can see it.
Sure.
They can actually see a star that's orbiting the damn thing in such a way that when it gets close to the black hole, it's traveling at something like 75% of the speed of light.
Yep,
it's the orbital velocity has accelerated that much as it drops down. So to our sight, it's not a sphere of a sun anymore. It's like this stretched sausage.
Yeah.
Because the way light is bent and the way it is bent. But we can see, like astronomers actually have pictures of a star disk planets forming.
Okay.
Like the I can't remember the telescopes they used in Chile, but so you have a red circle. In the center of the circle, you have what is going to be a sun. It's starting to light up, and then swirling around that central point are orbs that are sucking in material, becoming planets.
Pretty cool.
Yep, it's also very hot. Boom, boom. But we can see that happening now.
Yeah.
But so if it's happening in other galaxies, what's the connection between us and them?
What do you mean?
So space is really,
Gravity?
really big. No.
They have
Space is
gravity. We
really-
have some too. That's the
No,
connection.
no. Space is really, really big.
Hmm.
So the distance between us and the next closest star, plural, because I think there's 3 of them, Alpha Centauri A, B, and C,
Hmm.
is 5 light years.
Hmm.
So at the speed of light, it takes 5 years to get there.
Sure.
And at the speed of light, it takes 5 years to get back.
Hmm.
So to build the fastest rocket theoretically possible, which is the Valkyrie out of Avatar, which can make it to, I think, 50% or 25% the speed of light because it's using antimatter, that takes 20 years.
Okay.
Okay. So if there's another Earth being made in the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the next galaxy closest to us,
Hmm.
so what? What's that got to do with us?
I really don't understand what you're trying to say. What's it? Nothing. It's got nothing to do with what we're experiencing right here.
Right. So it doesn't interact with us at all.
As far as I can tell. What did I say that suggested it should?
No, because you're saying that there are 1,000 Earths made every 10,000 years or whatever. They're being
Whatever.
made now. Yeah,
Yeah.
being made now. To what purpose then?
To have another batch of us on that planet, put there by those
How?
beings. What's that?
How?
What
So
do you-
to get from here, to get from here to there,
Mhm.
they are using Clark's law.
I don't know what Clark's law is.
I explained it before. They are using technology so advanced that to us it is magic.
Oh yeah, it would definitely appear to us to be magic, something like that. Yeah, there's a description of the physicality of heaven in all of these, but in the Bible as well, where it's given a conversion factor, a standard size to start with for the smallest one to be converted, a shape, coloration, decorative features of it, so you can identify it easily. A total count, so you have size, color, all that stuff, and it describes these real objects, not ethereal objects, but real objects. And then there's a line that I've never heard a preacher address, and that's "and heaven rolled up like a scroll." And we're talking about, and every mountain was moved from its place. So we're talking about essentially small moon and small planet-sized objects that are three-dimensional. They're not two-dimensional discs, which are impossible. And then them rolling up as if it would look like they were on a piece of paper. Now I'm not totally certain how that would be done. In fact, I think I have absolutely no idea how you could do something like that, because I'm not a theoretical physicist at all. But that is what the story's recalling. And we lost his connection. And hopefully he'll be coming back. Odeon, if you were actually speaking before, you were a little bit quiet. If you could do something to bring your volume up a little bit, Odeon, that would be great. And Jeff, what do you think?
I was actually going to ask you, Richard, getting away from like the astrology kind of stuff, not astrology, but astronomy kind of stuff, and getting into some of the theological stuff. If you believe that kind of thing, it seems like your kind of theological take requires a sort of it's almost like there's a necessity for an apocalyptic conclusion, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So how would
Sorry
you,
about that.
because this is something that comes up every once in a while. This would irritate the heck out of like some of the people I talk to normally, but
Hello?
okay.
We hear you, Odeon. That sounds good. That's good volume.
All right, thanks.
If you get into something where, because the in the first century, the Christian church was very much a sort of apocalyptic kind of religion. It was very much about the return of the kingdom of heaven. It was about the end of the age. It was overturning of the powers that be, whatever.
Right.
But by the time you get into the pastoral epistles, which get kind of like controversial, because modern scholars disagree with whether or not they're actually written by Paul, and that would have been First Timothy, Second Timothy, and Titus.
Mm-hmm.
And those three, most scholars think those probably weren't written by Paul. They were probably written by somebody writing as if they were Paul later on. And they get into more kind of mundane, kind of the mundane aspects of like how the church should run. And they start to de-emphasize the apocalyptic elements of the church, the sort of certainty that, no, there's something revolutionary is going to happen, something definite is going to happen. And it starts to actually sort of push that into the background. So most of that stuff starts sounding like, it's not apocalyptic per se. It's life-changing in terms of what's going to happen to you spiritually. So I kind of wonder in terms of like...
I think they gave up on it being true.
Maybe. But I kind of wonder, like, in the way that you approach the scripture and the translation that you're putting on it, how do you sort of kind of reconcile what they're doing there? Because it seems like those three books particularly are starting to settle into a kind of... a ritualized, kind of formalized version of the church. It's even starting to talk about what do they call them, the presbyters and that kind of thing. They're starting to get into a very proto-church organization.
Sure.
And it's de-emphasizing the message of an apocalyptic change, the seismic change that's going to happen to humanity, and it's more about, hey, this is what you need to do when you meet each other, and this is how you need to guys.
Right.
This is how you have to hang out, and most importantly, this is how you need to distinguish yourself as believers from other people. That seems to be a big thing.
Okay. So some major overview to make clarity with all that. Okay. I believe that Christians are misguided, misunderstanding the text, that they go and testify to people. And the only time that testimony is effective is when heaven is in the sky, literal. And that would be only in the second half of end times, which you can imagine why that would be more convincing. If you had a massive alien invasion and you're pointing at that and people are freaking out and you're going, look, that's heaven, dude. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. Then a testimony would be a lot more effective than some pretend place in some ethereal plane of existence, perhaps in another universe or whatever, and all the rest of the crap they say. And in talking about engaging in that situation is when the testimony is talking about. So since this has happened multiple times, I would be surprised actually, and I wouldn't know why they would reference only one Mark, only one Matthew, only one John, etc. When they have many to choose from, because it's talking about the personality traits and the experience they had in end times, written from a past tense where it already happened, which would mean that they had already ascended. So I have absolutely no problem with for instance, the Gospels being 4 different stories, just because, well, they're 4 different stories. They should read as 4 different stories, and etc. like that. So putting it in the correct time frame instead of historic, but actually predictive, where people get to read the text and understand their position and follow the text as an instruction manual, rather than a recalling of people just like subjectively choosing to do things and it happened to work out.
But how would someone... I guess that would be kind of the thing, because, I mean, in the case of like the Gospels and stuff, we don't really know who the people were, and in terms of like,
sure we do,
dealing with certain apologists or dealing with certain,
we know that Jesus went around, found scum of the earth people that had real problems.
No, you don't.
And that he recruited them, and after the recruiting, they followed him around, and they split up. Sometimes they were together, and they testified. So it's more like job titles than actual names.
Right, but I mean, some of the stuff that they're talking about, at least in terms of like when they're trying to describe, like, let's say, the kind of basic idea of an infancy narrative of Jesus is based on historical facts and gets some of them wrong. That's when I kind of wonder, like, if you've got a predictive element to the story, all right. However, this is actually referring to historical facts and screwing them up.
No, it's not screwing them up. You could never tell a full picture of the future using the past, because things change. However, because of human nature, I think you can you can often use a lot of past events to describe a future event. So it's not intended to be, in my view, a history book, but it's using very little actual history to describe a future time.
So in your viewpoint, then essentially what's happening is it's using certain stories like this as examples instead of definitions. It's using those in place of that.
Yeah, I don't think it's supposed to be a history book at all, actually. Not history to this planet, but recalling the end of another planet and using some little of our actual history to like make the story seem like, oh, we shouldn't throw this away, it's complete fairy tale.
Well, wait, couldn't you then say if it's coming from a different planet or a different dimension, a different multiverse or something like that?
It doesn't need to be that complicated. Just be another planet. That'd be fine.
Does given the distance of the planets.
Those differences would be based on essentially differences in terms of just variation of outcome, right? Like a multiverse kind of thing. This person chose B instead of A. In our universe, he chose A. In that universe, he chose B.
I mean, you're exactly right. But then you're talking about people who went, oh, crap, this is important. They're real religious folks. Then they read the story of the position that they're playing, and they follow the instructions written there. Perhaps their instructions are the story of Saul, or one of them, their instructions is the story of Jesus, etc., like that. So they're performing an art piece to accomplish a goal, if you will.
Okay. All right.
Oh, hey.
Hello.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you, man. Can you hear me?
Okay. You could be a little louder. It'd be all right.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, yeah, I don't mean to cut in, but is Jefferson Spatchcock still there? Or he just checked out? Oh, there he is.
He's here. You're on a phone, aren't you?
No, yeah, I'm still. Did you want to ask me something?
Yeah, can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Now, you said that what you're saying, the first century church was very end times oriented. So what verses are you pointing to say that?
Specific verses, I don't have any offhand. I'm more or less going off of sort of a modern biblical scholar consensus of the writings from at least the 7 books that most scholars believe Paul, whoever he was, definitely wrote. His emphasis was on a kind of, if not an end of the world, or at least a change of times kind of emphasis that he really pushed. An idea that it wasn't just that the kingdom of heaven was not the kingdom of heaven wasn't where you went after you died, after you lived a good life, or after you were saved. The kingdom of heaven was literally going to happen, and it was coming soon, and it was going to happen in some people's real lifetimes.
That's right.
And there are different not to get too far afield of it, but there are different apocryphal accounts that sort of emphasize this mentality of Paul's, the narrative of Paul and Thecla puts that into contrast. Really kind of draws out Paul's take on this aspect of Christianity. So
Okay.
when I say apocalyptic, I don't mean, I'm not trying to say this in some kind of weird kind of like in kind of an anti-theistic. They're just a bunch of death cultists or something like that. I mean, in the case of, this is going to be a world-changing, world-shatteringly different thing that's going to happen, rather than what we end up getting right now in current, like at least in American evangelicism, which is a personal relationship with Jesus that makes you a better person and guarantees you a spot in heaven after you die.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. I mean, the only reason I asked is because I've heard other people say that, and I just like to know what verses. But you're basically saying it's some of the books that Paul wrote.
That's a pretty
And
good
the apocryphal
overview
stuff.
that Jeff just gave there. I mean, if I consider lines like "this generation shall not pass," and then qualifiers in the text, like if a prophet says something that's false about the prophecy, he's not a prophet. I mean, by that standard, I could say, without a bunch of dancing around and justifying, well, it did happen. Well, guess what? It didn't happen. it's easy for me to say from within the Bible that Christ is not the prophet, but it's describing Christ as the prophet.
Okay.
This is something that I think Islam gets into a little bit as well, because the ideas that kind of pop up in Pauline Christianity later on after Christ, as far as they're concerned, seem a little bit. They seem like a big stretch for them, because what they kind of take for granted is essentially what Christ is doing is he's just revealing another layer of revealed wisdom from God. It's the same God. So Abraham got some, Noah got some, Moses received some, Jesus received some. The idea of worshiping him as a deity and then pinning this sort of salvation element into it, and sort of churning it into a world-changing event based on either his death on the cross, his deity, both of those things, and then factoring into whether or not people are convinced that's true or not, or maybe even that's not necessary. All that stuff started to radically change the belief system. And so it's kind of interesting, because I think if you want to kind of like a look at how maybe Christianity, first century Christianity, was viewed by people early on, talk to someone who was raised specifically as a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
The way the Quran deals with it, and the way I think a lot of Islam, and this I'm generalizing because there could be some certain sects, certain groups that might change it a little bit. The way they deal with it probably reflects a lot on how people were dealing with it in the first century, and that maybe hasn't changed all that much versus how we have it now. I think a lot of Christians fail to understand how dynamic Christianity has been from the first century to now, and how much it's changed as a philosophy and in its theology.
Plenty. That's how much. Plenty. Yeah, it's really easy for us to crawl outside of our chains of bias and look at something that we're not emotionally connected to, and look at it harshly and honestly, and that's relatively easy. Unfortunately, most people that I talk to aren't very versed in other religions for me to have that opportunity to use that way. But I think that I was already unbiased. Being an anti-theist, I looked at all of them the same way, as interesting stories that some people need to stay alive as a crutch because they can't handle reality. And that's actually what I used to say about it. That I can look at it in such a way that I'm not really exercising a Christian bias for the text. So I'm not locked into this. Well, I can't think about this part. Even if I read this, I'm going to ignore it. Things like that. So because of that, I have a very odd outlook on that. But it's also very consistent, and it doesn't require me to like ignore evidences that we see, to believe in magic, to believe that there's some kind of alternate reality universe thing that we can't actually sense, that we would call heaven. I mean, I don't think it requires any of that stuff. Like saying, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Rich, I don't know if you'd ever heard me argue this before, but I didn't argue this disingenuously, but it was a little bit dishonest. I've argued this a couple of times with Jesus is Lord. And probably with praise in one way too. I've argued on the side of universalism.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's interesting because, like, if you're doing a video, if it happens to attract one of their attention,
Right.
at least as far as like Jesus is Lord is concerned,
Yeah, they're going to talk
he'll
smack
point you
about
out.
me.
Yeah, he'll just say that you're a heretic and
Sure. I am a heretic.
Right. What I think is weird about that, though, the example that you gave, it's like, okay, in your particular case, the take that you have on the scripture and how the Bible works is genuinely unique, no doubt about it. However, if I had to claw one thing back, what I think is interesting is that you only have to change one little component, for at least for Christians. I don't know about, if you're talking about the Old Testament and Judaism, it might be a little bit more advanced. But for Christianity, all you got to do is change the one tiny thing. You add in the element of universalism, where essentially you make the claim, okay, Jesus had the capacity to save everyone's sin, so he did. So there is no salvation. Salvation can't be denied, even in a Calvinist sense. Everyone is saved because Jesus had the capacity to save everyone. So any of these other mentions that pop up about weeping and gnashing of teeth or any of this other kind of stuff, these are all based on ideas that came before, and anything that Paul might be getting into are based on either exaggerations or things that are based on a kind of his own apocalyptic outlook. But essentially, in terms of like your soul needing to be saved, if Jesus paid the debt, if that's how it works, or if he took the punishment, if that's how it works, or if he defeated death, or what, however that happens to play out, whatever it was, he did that on his own, without our permission, without us saying yay or nay. And the result of it is we benefit from it because he did it. Whether we acknowledge it, accept it, believe it, or are even aware of it.
So
that concept alone for a lot of Christians is a mind job.
Oh yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is to Jill, Praise, and several others. Why is your God prejudiced, small, and extremely wasteful, making spirits just to fill hell? That's stupid. Your God is a huge failure. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing that I would say about that total idea is that if these stories are all saying the same thing, and I actually got a pretty staunch Christian to agree to the other day that if Jesus is effective and if there's foreshadowings, there could be foreshadowings of Jesus in more ancient religions. That would be consistent with God doing stuff on the planet in real time. And I got a Christian to agree with me that that is at least possible to believe from within a spiritual framework. But I think it's only tribalism and personal pride that is making us say these ridiculous things that is cutting down the effectiveness of a God, making it, I don't know, a lot less than a God. Not even understanding us at apparently almost any level.
Well, I think you were there for some of it. But when I was having that, I jumped into that conversation, I think a week ago, that Praise had on, and a few people on there, and I was getting into sort of, I kept bringing up the subjective experience of God or Christianity, but really what I was talking about was the emotional payout.
Right.
And I thought it was weird because Gavin was on there, Gavin Hurlman, and he basically said, no, there's no, for him, there's no emotional component. That's not what he's looking at. It doesn't need to be emotional. It doesn't need any emotional payback or anything like that. I find that to be uniquely unaware for an individual, because at the very least, most of those guys derive some kind of emotional satisfaction out of believing that they're right and that the people that they talk to are wrong, that they're missing out on something, that they've got something wrong, that they don't have the facts. And I thought it was weird when I heard that, and I don't know if I was talking past them when I was talking about the subjective experience. Maybe they were getting their claws up and thinking that by subjective I was talking about their own translation, their own spin on it. But really what I was talking about, like, what makes you feel anything
like it's true
towards this position that you feel? And it seemed to me that they're like, oh, nothing. I'm not looking for an emotional payout at all. I'm like, really? Because
I'm personally looking for and receive both an emotional payout and a logical payout. Yeah. That I think this view of it, although it's adopted, I didn't invent it. I've adopted it. I think it's brilliant, first of all. And I am set back on my heels by that. But more than that, I see great beauty and love and understanding and brotherhood and sisterhood described in these stories, and it moves me deeply emotionally. In fact, if I read of the relationship between Lakshman and Hanuman, I cry. It's just extremely touching. That people can have a truly deep and meaningful platonic love that is based in honesty and understanding. Just blows me away.
Yeah. I thought it was weird that when I was talking to them that they're maybe they weren't willing to say one way or the other because they thought I was trying to trick them into something, or they just don't want to get touchy-feely. But maybe there's enough people out there that are just like, and I think I mentioned to this, I emailed you something about this. I think there's been kind of a capture in Christianity, modern, at least a YouTube Christianity, where rhetoric is all. If you've got a great argument, if you can prove that you're right, if you can beat your opponent verbally, it's sort of like, as long as you've got the winning chess move, then you've got the right religion. But it's like, okay, but how satisfying is that past the point where, and they're like, oh, it doesn't have to be emotionally satisfying. I don't need to get my fifis up. I'm like, you do if you're doing the dry pumpy move after you think that you've pwned an opponent on YouTube. You are deriving emotional satisfaction from your faith, but you're deriving it from the fact that you think that you're rhetorically correct every time you engage with them in an argument. What I'm wondering is, could it be, and given the fact that we're supposed to be engaging in we're supposed to have a personal relationship with this particular Lord and Savior, are there other emotions that we're meant to experience other than just feeling like we're superior to people when we think they're wrong on the internet? Like, I thought there was more to this when Paul was writing about this stuff.
Again, I think it's okay. There's certain parts of the story which are talking about giving us a very, very light briefing, not a thorough briefing at all, on what we'll experience as a people in heaven, living together in heaven. There's a little bit in the text about that. But generally, I think what it's talking about is relationship building. I'll give you a for instance. People who are just spoiled rotten because there's so much resources dedicated to them, especially like wealthy Americans, like ridiculously rich Americans, have very, very little empathy for others. And that's obvious. And that's part of the thing, is they're not supposed to, but I think it's a default position that without a broad spectrum experience of adversity within life, you don't develop brotherhood. It's the same reason that you and I the other night, talking about military experiences, had a little laugh, shared a few stories, and felt comfortable saying anything. What's that? That was your brother.
I just want to correct you before you go too far. That was actually my brother.
That was your brother. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were entitled, given permission to share our military experiences. I'm so sorry. That was rude at best.
No, it's fine. I just want to make sure that that happens all the time. Being a twin, it just comes with the.
My apologies.
Part of the deal.
Yeah, I don't think you're the same human.
Which one's the evil twin?
They're both evil.
They both have the mustache.
They
Awesome.
both, yeah. It's curled up, like Jim Major's.
I grow a better mustache, so I must be more evil.
You are the evil one then, okay.
Yeah.
So we two pregnant women can approach each other in a grocery store never having met. There's a reason for that.
Right.
And that's important. It's an important reason. It's not frivolous. So everything that goes wrong, quote unquote, and makes our life hard, and we don't like it, all these air quotes. I really don't have a problem with any of that stuff happening. I'm thankful that it happened in my life to make me see things the way I do now. Think of you as the animal that you are right now. Appreciate you as you are, no matter what your situation might be. You could say Buddhism says life path. You could look at it that way. And the eventuality of it is, I think, understanding and respecting other beings and where they are and what they are and all of those things. But you need to have some trouble in order to accomplish that, I think.
Yeah, I think you got to get some miles in your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jefferson.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to give you an invitation. I don't know if it's bad protocol to talk about another channel on somebody else's channel.
Go ahead.
But you're invited to my channel if you want to. I have videos that you might think are pretty interesting.
Oh, okay.
That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Are you talking about like a YouTube channel?
Oh yeah. It's the Fifth Trumpet YouTube channel.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out.
It's very nice. Okay, so I think if I can make a small assertions just to get this thing rolling again, because I think that was wrapping up the topic, unless you had more, Jeff.
No, I don't.
Okay. So I think that what's being described is the truth of a time when our ancestors interfere and do things quite on purpose. So it's not really prophecy to them, what they are going to do because they have a plan. It's prophetic to us and seems magical to us because they haven't done it yet. But it like addresses divine hiddenness and some other problems to just simply say intelligence that are avoiding us on purpose to do certain things in a certain order so that we recognize the magnitude and the order of the things that they do, so that we at that time do not mistake it for anything other than what it is. Which means it obviously hasn't happened.
Am I the only non-theist in the room?
Jefferson, you're not a theist.
No, I would probably put myself in the camp of being either. I don't know. I think it gets kind of weird defining it, because I think the way it gets kind of mutilated is a little weird. I might be closer to like an atheist in the sense that I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to be rejecting. You know,
I can relate to that.
You know, the concept of a God. I mean, I think Noam Chomsky actually was an atheist too, because when he was asked, he's like, I don't know if I can say that I'm an atheist because I'm not exactly sure what I'm turning down. And given he was a linguist, you know, he might have been onto something. Generally speaking, though, I think that the idea that there seems to be this idea in philosophy that there's either a positive belief that there are no gods, or there's a lack of belief of a God, and I believe in both of those. So, and then I think that gods basically are also slightly irrational, or to the point where there's really no point in even really jumping into atheism or agnosticism. So I like to play all three sides, really. I'm a coward. That's what I'm trying to say.
It just sounds like an honest position. It doesn't sound like cowardice.
I really don't like. I mean, because I remember like watching like Ozymandias, Steve McRae, Nate Brody. They would get into long, drawn out arguments about what the actual definition of atheism, when they needed to get that nailed down. And I'm like, I really don't think it matters. And as far as like philosophy is concerned, I don't think it's even established. Depending on the kind of argument that you try to take. For some arguments, atheism is you're not convinced that something is so. And that could be like the agnostic position. You just don't know. And then a positive atheist position could be, you know what? There are no gods. And the level of certainty that you use to describe that determines what kind of atheist you are. You're a hard atheist or a soft atheist or whatever. I really don't care about that. But I think at the end of the day, if somebody pushes me, for the most part, I start asking them questions about, what God are you talking about? What does it do? What is it capable of? What does it mean to you? That kind of stuff. And so until I can get something clear from them, I'm basically an atheist, because when they're asking me like, hey, do you believe in God? Do you mean your God? Well, let's find out what your God is. Odds are they're not going to be able to fully define it. So I'm just going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So.
Yes, I identify as a non-theist.
I find the Christian description of the quadruple O God, and I don't understand the arguments perfectly that have been made against the possibility of that, because it's self-defeating, but I think that's true. But I also don't think it's a necessity of the text. It's not claimed by any story. So Christians will say things like that based on their presuppositions, their belief systems, their context that they've adopted. And yes, those things might be necessary extrapolations for the way they're reading the text, but that doesn't make it true in the text. You know, like the difference between something being actually omnipresent, like saying something like God is everywhere. Well, if God is everywhere, God is presently in your anus. Okay, so
It's technically true. I get it.
that would be technically true, right? So, but you say that to a Christian, they get kind of set back and they go, "Oh, I never thought is God in my anus." And if God is all material in like a deistic kind of a theism, then every morning at about 10 o'clock, I wipe a little God off my backside. And that sounds really rude, but it'd be technically correct. Okay. But experientially, however, to my mind, if God is with me everywhere that I go and everywhere that I look, there is God. Okay, so that would give the appearance to me, from my position, of omnipresence without God being in my rectum. You know what I'm saying?
My favorite was when I challenged somebody who was trying to define. I was having a discussion about the problem of evil, and they were essentially using the argument that there is no problem of evil. Evil is defined as the absence of God. It's sort of, they were using this argument like, well, think about it this way. You know, what is cold? It's simply the absence of heat. You know, it's this absence of energy. And I was like, okay, this is perfectly cool. Now that you've said that, I got you to agree with the fact that you agreed that God was the four O's, and one of those was omnipresent. So how is an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present being everywhere all the time absent in any kind of sense to allow evil in?
It's a great point. It's inconsistent.
Crickets. Got crickets.
You imagine that?
Yeah,
Huh.
started getting them to pivot. Well, that's not exactly what presence means. I'm like, oh, okay. So is it presence like in stage presence? Like he's like Denzel Washington? He's that kind of omnipresent? Like, okay.
No, Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman.
More like Morgan. Well, if you're going to have God in modern day, it needs to be Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, it's Morgan Freeman. It's like, oh, that's omnipresence. Okay, I get it. No, yeah, he wasn't actually in my room and across the street. No,
Right.
He's just Morgan Freeman cool. Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Where
the way that I read that, it means that if you are able to, if a God exists and you are able to experience the God, then no matter how many of you there are, human beings on the planet, and no matter where they go and what they explore, then God is with them.
Right.
Okay.
And actually, Darth Dawkins in
this
particular case actually says that it's absolutely necessary in order for, it's not just enough for it to be an absolute being or something like that, but it has to be the case that it is in some kind of personal relationship with you.
Well, I think if you don't have a personal relationship, you have almost nothing.
Yeah. My problem with that, though, is that if you start talking about a being with those capabilities, especially the omniscient ones, you can't have a personal relationship with it at all, because at that point, there is absolutely nothing that you can do to determine whether or not that thing is actually omniscient or not. Now, I could tell you that it's omniscient all day long, and then it could start telling you everything and anything that you'd ever want to know about anything, including all your personal stuff, and never get it wrong. But then at some point, it's going to answer a question you can't understand. There's going to be no way for you to verify it, and therefore, at that point, that being, as far as you know, may or may not be omniscient. The only way you could ever know it was actually omniscient is for you to be omniscient. Otherwise, there's no verification of it.
Right.
So
now, the way I take the story is, since it's a set of instructions and encouragements, warnings, and promises, since that's essentially what it is, and I think the one able to actually do what the story says is always the hero of the story. That is, call him Christ, call him Buddha, call him Thor, I don't care. But it's talking about an actual individual receiving instruction from religious text. That since this person, this individual, like physical person, was planned from the beginning of the planet to occur, that all of the claims of understanding from the text are talking about not a large people group, but only that singular individual, which is why it reads in the first person that way, talking about a singular. I've counted every hair on your head, not every hair on everyone's or all your heads. You see,
Okay.
so in that way, I can understand by the way that they're reading it, thinking that they are the intended audience, which is ridiculous, and the mistake of the Mormons and why they get their own planet, because they're reading it from the position of Christ, so or of the hero. So they think the promises are to them, the individual reader, when it is only to the hero. That's the mistake of Mormonism.
Can you blame them? They think they're going to get an entire planet out of the deal.
Well, it does read that way. It does. They're not completely wrong. They just made the assumption they are the intended audience.
Right.
That's the only mistake they made, really. I mean, from their view on the Bible itself. So,
Hey, Richard, I'll go ahead. Sorry.
No, if you have to go. If you or
No, I
you
was
want to
going
say
to cut
something,
in, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I can go on forever like this.
Well, okay, I'll just want to make one comment back on what you guys were saying. I'm just giving my own personal opinion. Like the things that I see from the Christian and atheist community on YouTube, a lot of it, like to me, is like missing the point. Like things like maybe it's important to other people, but things like slavery and morality and is this real and is that real? I mean, I don't know. To me, it's not hitting the mark. And then the other point I would say is like the way people talk. Like for me, if you're not using a Bible verse to back up what you're saying, you're just not talking Bible. So, and then when people go on these hour-long conversations, I'm not saying you do, but these shows,
I
and they
do, but
talk
I'll
and they
stick with.
talk and they talk and they say they're trying to prove this and they're trying to prove that, but they never ever bring up one Bible verse. But I have no idea what they're really even talking about. That's just my opinion.
Well, I'll tell you what they're talking about. What they're talking about is necessities and logic to their belief system about the Bible. That's what they're talking about.
Right.
And you could say, oh, Darth Dawkins, you could say William Lane Craig, and they go on and on about things that are not in the Bible.
Exactly.
I mean, there's plenty. I actually purchased a book recently on the recommendation of an agnostic, or not an agnostic, but a Christian apologist who had actually said that the Bible is the only thing that you needed, and then he gave a recommendation for essential Christianity. I can't remember who the author of the book is, but I got it, and it basically lays out like essentially American kind of standard Protestant American evangelicism as like a whole. He uses a lot of Bible in there, and he lays out a lot of stuff, and it's like, okay, this is fine, this is cool. I guarantee you, I can compare that. I could take that to a Roman Catholic priest, drop that on his desk and be like, hey, I've highlighted all the things in here. This is what this guy says it means. And the Catholic priest would be like redlining that thing all afternoon.
Sure.
So, I mean, the problem that I have with most of what happens in any of these discussions, largely, is that there is, I agree with Fifth Trumpet in the case that if what you're looking for is someone to back up what they think the Bible says with what the Bible actually has written in it, yes, I agree with you. However, the problem with this is that notions of God have existed since before the Bible. And so dealing with the sort of philosophical God or the God of Spinoza, the omni-God, those kinds of concepts, those actually exist outside the Christian Bible.
Easily.
And when somebody says, hey, what does the Bible say? Well, that's actually kind of a tricky thing because it depends on who you ask. If you're talking about the entire Christian Bible, it means a very different thing than if you ask a Jew, what does quote unquote the Bible say? There's only so many books in that thing, right? It's the Jewish Bible. It's only the Old Testament. That's actually fewer books than the Septuagint. So when you ask them, what is this thing? What does this say? And what does this mean to you? It's a totally different, it's completely different. So, I mean, yeah, the way arguments usually happen in YouTube, they're always going to be messed up and you know, kind of clustered and screwed up. But that's just,
I actually see that as beautiful and perfect.
Yeah, I think it's actually more important to kind of focus on I don't think there's really any point in saying, hey, if you're going to have a discussion like this, agree to this, unless multiple parties decide, hey, what we're going to do a Bible verse off. We're going to pick Bible verses. We're going to look at them. We're going to try to balance them. The only problem with that is that you get the literalist who reads it word for word. You get the semantic who reads it in Hebrew or Greek or whatever the original language is. He's not going to truck with any of that. And then he's transliterating it. He's not translating it, quote unquote, correctly. So then you get those issues. Then you got the person who comes at it from the Hebrew perspective, the modern biblical perspective, the Christian perspective, the Islamic perspective. All the scripture immediately starts to change. It's like it's sort of almost like a Schrodinger's cat kind of thing. As soon as you open the box, the thing's dead, right? Like, or it's alive. Either way, yeah.
I think it'd be difficult to have something accidentally this arguable. It's like, no, I'm really serious. Think about it. I mean, I know that's a funny thought, but it's just like tree falls in the woods. Does it make a sound if no one is there to hear it? Those are loaded. Those are loaded terms, because as soon as you say sound instead of vibration, what you're saying is that's the word sound suggests that something recorded it.
No.
Okay. But then immediately after that, they say there's nothing there to record it. And so it's designed to be argued.
Now imagine that phrase was said in ancient Hebrew, and the Hebrew word for sound actually also meant to fart. And oh my God, where do we go with that? Like,
hey, you want to hear a funny one? I'll tell you a funny one. Fountains of the deep can mean vagina.
What?
Fountains of the deep can mean vagina.
Where did you get that?
I'm serious. Literally, I can show you that.
I mean,
it's actually a better reading. It's a cleaner reading to call fountains of the deep women having children, vaginas bursting open, literally.
So "Rolling in the Deep," that song from that means something a little different now. I mean,
it might. I don't know. I don't know that song. Is it an ancient Jewish song? I don't think so. Maybe.
No, it's not. No.
Yeah.
It might be a better song if it were in ancient Hebrew. But.
And the word firmament better describes the outside shape of the dome of heaven, the spherical shape of heaven, and then the outside sphere of the earth as the two firmaments that separate the waters meaning spirits of men, angelic in heaven, and mankind on the planet. That actually works much cleaner than what Christians talk about. So I think there literally is a dome of the firmament. No kidding. You're just looking at that. You're not on the inside of it right now. But as it arrives, you'd be looking at the outside of it. How do you like them apples?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. I'm also thinking about fountains of the deep. And by fountains of the deep, I mean vaginas.
Yeah. Yeah, the word fountain there, the original word actually is eye in the landscape, like an eye in the landscape.
Huh.
It does not mean water bubbling up out of the ground at all. But as I look down over a woman's stomach, there's definitely an eye in the landscape. There is. 100% of the ones that I've seen anyway.
So, what do the theists think of, say, the Gnostic Gospels? You know, the Gospel according to Mary, the Gospel according to Judas.
My opinion is if they're not in the Bible for a reason. So I don't take them as valid, but there's no harm in knowing them.
But my opinion is they're left out of the Bible for a reason. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Because they told the truth, the real truth.
And my opinion is, which is different from those two opinions.
Well, was a council that went through and said, no, we're going to take these 4 books as opposed to all the rest.
Sure.
And then you've got the Celtic Church, which was wiped out by the Italian the Roman Church, and they didn't have original sin.
Yeah, they kind of unloaded that. It was interesting.
I think that if I had something that was 99.5% consistent and 0.5% didn't match, I'd say the 99.5 is right, the 0.5 is wrong. In the reading frame that I've adopted on these stories, it works on 99% of the stuff worldwide. And then first and second Maccabees, there's no lesson in it. Second Ruth, no lesson in it. It's just repeating the same crap that they read somewhere else, trying to like confirm it, and I think that's stupid.
The other thing too is like some of it is because they'll claim that when they were seeking canonicity, they wanted something, another thing to confirm the thing that they were looking to rule out. And when they couldn't find it, they would act as if like, well, it's just not working out for us. Like, okay, well, that's fine. It'd be one thing if it was actually contradicting. Like, let's say they had they've got four gospels
that contradict each other,
and this other gospel, this fifth gospel, is just completely out of control. It's just like it's like Spam-A-Lot compared to the other four. And they're like, what the hell is going on with this damn thing? Like, there's clearly something very different about this. These ones almost sort of make sense. This one's completely off its rocker. But when they had ones that it had nothing to do with it being consistent. They just have like the infancy gospels of Jesus, where Jesus as a tyke was a little bit of an asshole. So the problem with the infancy gospel wasn't that it was contradictory. It was just too extra. It was too much to explain to people, like this kid running around with superpowers.
Cosmic Dennis the Menace.
Yeah, turning his friends into snakes and making it and striking his teachers blind. This was a dick. These were dickhole moves, and people didn't want to think of Jesus as being a complete dickhole, even though they were like, oh, okay, so he's growing as a person, but he's fully developed as far as a God goes. There's clearly some immaturity going on here with the narrative and some of the themes happening. So yeah, I kind of get where they're coming with that. However, if there was a being that actually was God incarnate, is it impossible that he would be a little bit of a dickhole when he was going through puberty? Who knows?
It would even be likely, I think. I mean, I remember puberty. I showed off. I hurt people on purpose to show that I was stronger than they were. Yeah.
Once you start getting a little jam in the berries, things start to swell up, and you start to like, especially as a guy, and that's what he was. That'd be different if he was a girl. Like he's going through puberty as a girl. It'd be an entire complicated narrative about adolescence as female Jesus. But male Jesus,
Bible, the Twilight Saga.
Male Jesus is just like, I mean, when guys go through puberty, it's just like we get hair on our genitals and we want to fuck anything that moves. That's it.
Or even
so the Gospel
just
of Mary,
get excited for no reason at all.
The Twilight Saga.
Yeah. So, I think consistency is the only way to say something. It's the only tool that I know of that could reckon all that. And since Jesus doesn't defeat physics anywhere in the Bible, I think he also did not defeat physics in reality as a child.
So you don't believe in the narratives like he fed the multitudes, or
Sure he does, but what does it mean?
Oh, are you talking about just it has a narrative meaning? It's not a literal thing.
No, it's ridiculous as a literal. It's a magic trick at best. I mean, let's say that you were there and you saw that happen. You yourself, you're the actual you, and you saw that happen today. Would you be impressed by that, or would you think, "Wow, that was a really cool trick"? Would you worship this person? Would you think they were like godlike?
Well, I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that this guy's going to defeat the Roman Empire, reestablish my culture's dominance in the area, and then have a personal relationship with me in perpetuity as a spiritual being, while simultaneously saving my soul from eternal damnation. No,
right. That's not what you go to, right? You go to Penn and Teller.
I would be like, cool trick, bro. Show me how you
Where's the secret door? How'd you do that? That was pretty cool. What was very convincing. Good job.
Yeah.
You'd
Well,
like
yeah.
clap.
What's on your feet? How are you balancing like that? Because you just fed the multitudes. Everybody's had lots of
Right
wine that you made.
Right on.
Well,
Because I think that happened.
Jefferson, I mean, honestly, and you know, whether it's literal, there's always a deeper meaning to what he's saying. You
I
want to
don't know
call
that
it a,
that's entirely true.
well, it is. If you want to call it a fictitious story, that's fine. But
No, no,
there's
no.
always something
It doesn't
deeper than
necessarily
that.
have to be fictitious. I just don't know that there's any meaning any deeper than what it is, other than that's a cool trick. That's how impressive he's supposed to be.
I mean, today somebody would like set up a tip jar for this guy. People would like throw ones at him.
He's the first century Levantine version of a busker. Like,
Right.
you need to silver up there, Jesus. People can't see you. You don't pop in selfies without with the glam silver on. No, I mean, I don't. Well, the other thing I don't get too is that if you have a being, if this particular physical being is showing up in the real world around us and is supposed to be the physical manifestation of the actual full creator God, right?
Mhm.
And that God is also supposed to be the establishment of natural morality, natural laws in physics. What's it doing as a human being? Violating the natural laws of physics and reality around people to show how fucking awesome it is. This is childishness.
Yep, it would be.
It's that is just childish embellishment of a god. It's like, well, what is he? Well, he's godlike. Okay, well, what can he do? Hang on, let me think. He can walk on water. No, get the fuck out of here. No,
Ta-da!
he did it. He did it.
Like you need. I imagine a set of cymbals and a hi hat there.
But
Jesus.
yes, but to compete with the mythologies
your
of the
waitress.
time, he has to do his 12 labors of Hercules. Or else, the Greeks aren't going to give up rats and all that sort of thing. So
Right.
he's competing with the other mythologies of the time, given the stories that have come down.
Or
Yeah.
it's
Been
actually the
preserved in
same
the
story.
And the thing to me is that it's kind
Don't
of it's
see
weird.
him very much Jesus killing lions with his bare hands in the stories.
Really? You heard of Samson?
It's not Jesus, it's Samson.
That's your assumption.
No.
I know it uses a different name. I'm not saying it doesn't.
But it seems to me like if I mean, for a lot of Christians, they'll get into this idea where they'll get into the fact that the reason the mundane is the mundane is because God allows it, and isn't that freaking cool? And yet, like you said, if God is popping up in the first century and he's got to compete with other ideas of God out there, he might need to do something extra special, especially since you got guys running around hucking thunderbolts around and they're super strong and whatever.
Right on.
So
Pretty impressive stuff.
he can make a whip and attack moneylenders. Yeah, he did do that. He got really triggered by those guys.
Yeah. As to the lion reference, lion is the symbol on the tribe of Judah, and or Leo the lion, the constellation. Okay. So he's born into the tribe of Reuben, which is the bull, which is why you get so much bull symbology. And he's the lion of Judah, which is why you get so much lion symbology. So to kill a lion with your bare hands and then eat honey out of the rib cage. Bees do not live in bodies of dead animals normally. I guess it could happen, but it's not likely. And not tell his mother and father in the story of Samson. And I would like to hear the details of the story of, what did you say, Hercules? Is that what you said? Peebo? I'd like to hear
Hercules.
that.
The Greek mythology is not my thing. I have a friend who was really into that.
Okay.
Then they moved on to the Pendragon era, which is also really cool.
Yeah.
There's also a good role-playing game, actually.
Cool. Okay, so I think the reason we keep seeing these repetitive symbologies is because it's talking about the same thing. Just like not to change the topic, the seven-headed Hydra and of Heracles, and the seven-headed dragon in the book of Revelation, which represents the beast of Satan, which
Yes,
kills
but they pretty much
Hercules, kills
understood.
Jesus. What's that?
Oh, they also pretty much understood, but even back then, prime numbers. So
I'm sure they understood prime numbers, but what's the meaning of 7 as a prime number?
7.
Why not
7's a
3?
prime number. Why not 9?
How about 11?
Yeah, that's what I said. But the only hang on, front door.
Okay. So I think these similarities are not by accident, that it's just told everywhere again and again and again. That was my point.
I really like Praise. I think he does a real good job. I mean, he's totally
I think
dedicated.
I think he's sweet and cute.
Who Praise?
Yeah.
Praise I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really like what he does.
He's more open-minded than a lot of Christians I have known, unless he's in an argument, in which case he gets very closed-minded. But that a lot of people do that. That's okay. But I mean, he'll at least accept arguments that I've made about, like, whether or not there's been a Sabbath, that the word sword can actually mean testify, that it's not talking about murdering people and smashing babies' heads against rocks. That those
Right.
aren't good, clean readings in context. That the word father in the text always means God. That the word master means in the slave laws literally means a sovereign, as in perfect righteous leader. That's what sovereign means. And throughout the rest of the text, the only sovereign is the Christ. So really, the slave laws are a discussion between Christ and his Father, and you can break that up and argue with it however you like. But and they're talking about who saved that individual devotee. That's what the discussion is: the devotee and who saved them. Which is why you get weird laws like at the end of the 6th year, going into the 7th year of Jubilee, they have to be released. What the hell is that? Slaves don't get released because they did 6 years and it's the 7th year now. But if a person were like spent all 7 years of end times and they stayed to the very, very end of it, and they hung around following the teacher, the Christ, and they did that for 7 years, and then they go, I like you, but you know what? I just figured out that actually it was my biblical belief from Catholicism or Baptists or whatever that really saved me, not you. Well, that totally makes sense, and they should be given that right. They should be able to decide for themselves. But if you have somebody who's foreign born, from a foreign land and all that, well, then they're referring to a non-believer, a complete atheist who has like no belief in any of that crap, and obviously the father has no rights because it's the one who's presently been there convincing them that has all the rights because they did the work. Either that or it's about ancient slavery and it's stupid and pointless.
Yeah,
it could just be about ancient slavery.
That's what I'm saying. It's like some of the subjects that people talk about, like they're so into this slavery, and I guess I shouldn't knock morality. Obviously, it's a real thing, but they talk about it endlessly. Like so many, it's like 7, 8, 9, 10 video or streams on the same thing over and over.
Well, it is emotionally compelling, but we should think about why it's emotionally compelling. The Christian has to say, my God is a horrible monster whom I love.
I'm going to have to bow out. I have a guest. Thank you very much for having me.
Congratulations for having a guest. Please spoil
Yes,
them.
they are not escaping the ants. They're not fleeing in terror. Have a nice one.
It's pleasant having you. Thank you.
I just think there's more meat on the bone than some of these subjects that people talk about. That's all.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, the slave laws make no sense even as slave laws for the area and of the time. If it's actually laws about slavery, I mean, the Hebrew people were very big on building an empire from their family. The word son means building block. That's what the word son actually means. That's how you start a foundation of building an empire, a great house, is by having a son. And in that part of the world, that's true, you know? So he's actually calling his son a cut block. That's what the word son means there. And so to think about there being no law anywhere describing what should be done if the father dies is unimaginable in the Hebrew. It's unimaginable to think, okay, here's this child who went away and there's no stipulation for if dad dies while they're gone. Are you freaking kidding me?
It does seem a little bit unusual since they actually have stipulations for, like, there's a common thing that comes up where some apologists will say there's no such thing as polygamy in the Old Testament. There is. There's actually a description of Laverite marriage, which is not only, it's not allowed polygamy, it's compelled polygamy. It's very specific, and it has like a whole particular subscription, and I'd have to actually look it up. Like they probably should, just so that I'm not accused of like making up stuff.
No, don't do it right now.
But anyway, Laverite marriage is essentially the idea that two brothers own a piece of land. Both of them are married. Both have wives. One of them dies childless.
That's right.
And his widow, who is the sister-in-law of his surviving brother, that surviving brother is meant to marry her.
Expected to. She's expected to voluntarily have children with him.
And he needs to actually get her pregnant because the problem is that the family didn't expand sufficiently enough. This is the purpose of Laverite marriage. There weren't enough heirs being born from all the sons that came from the father. One of them died before he could get his wife pregnant. And so the other brother needs to step up and make sure he gets his sister-in-law pregnant instead. If that brother does not do this, he can be shunned by the sister-in-law. And they will actually permanently change, according to the routine, they actually changed the name of the brother as that guy that, I don't know what it is.
That dirtbag.
They call him like Jimmy No Name or something after that point. Like,
yep.
and somebody gets to huck a shoe at him, which is like the height of an insult. But yeah, so it's like, okay, not only
because his brother didn't have any offspring to be heirs to his work, and that's a disservice to the dead. So you have to make kids for your brother.
Right, and this particular brother, he's like, oh, well, this is some guy who thinks that he's extra special. He's only going to sleep with his one wife. He's not going to sleep with his sister-in-law. He basically doesn't care about expanding the family name. Therefore, he might as well not have a name from the jump. That's the basis for this law, and it's built into the Old Testament. And yet, as Richard was saying, there are certain things about the patriarch dying where they really don't get into the details of that.
Yeah,
but
it makes no sense. Those details aren't there.
Laverite marriage. It's weird,
right? Like, there's no way that got oversight. That was just an oversight. There's no way it just didn't make it into the slavery laws. No way. But it makes perfect sense to me if the father can't die, to not have a stipulation for the father dying. Why would you put a stipulation for something that can't happen?
I suppose so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. Final thoughts.
I don't have any really. I do need to get to bed, though. I'm way past my bedtime, but I haven't been sleeping all that great anyway. It's been hot here, so I'm going to check out of here. Congratulations, Richard.
Thank you so much. Thanks for showing up. You really helped to provoke some thought. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You guys take it easy. It was nice meeting some of you. Thanks for subscribing, those of you who did. I'm happy to disappoint you. I don't put out near enough content. So have a good one, guys. Talk to you later.
All right, take it easy.
Peace. Last thoughts, Cal.
All right, I'll let you go, man. I know you want to go.
No, no, no. I
No,
should
I would
go
s-
because I have responsibilities to tend to, and I
I
thank you
would
very
say
much for coming on and participating.
I would say thank you for your time
Thank you.
and your work that you do, and that's about it. Thank you.
Peace and respect.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Later. And Odeon, are you still here? Are you audible? Odeon, Odeon. I'm going to give him a chance while I say my goodbyes to everybody. There's a pretty good long list, actually. Agnostic, Pagan Mother, Wild Heart 666. Mind Onion showed up for a little while. Remember Sammy Jenkins, several others. Thank you all so much for, first of all, being kind enough and open enough to be interested in this kind of a conversation, especially considering that what I'm talking about here is the view that I've adopted, which is more than fringe, worse than obscure. Someone said to me, I'm part of religion that has a practitioner base of one, and they might be right. They might be right. I don't know. But thank you all for coming and hanging out with me for a little while, having a little fun, made a couple jokes, and had some serious conversation. I personally learned a lot about outer space and recent programs, things that I had no idea were going on from Pivo Thulu. So I thank Pivo especially for that part of the conversation. I wish you all peace and respect. And I want you to know that I do very much look forward to the day that we're all great friends. Good night.